The wedding guests were still clapping when Duke Rowan Ashford looked his new bride in the eye and said, "Tomorrow, I'm divorcing you." No hesitation, no remorse, just cold certainty delivered like a death sentence in front of 300 witnesses. Lydia Hale didn't cry, didn't flinch. She just stood there in that ridiculous white gown, fingers locked tight around a bouquet she hadn't chosen, and thought, so this is how they break you. But here's the thing about being thrown to the wolves. You either lie down or you learn to bite back. This is the story of a woman who refused to disappear, a marriage built on lies, and a truth so dangerous it could burn down every noble house in the capital. If you want to see how far this story goes, hit like, drop a comment with your city, and let's find out together. The first mistake people made about Lydia Hale was assuming she cared. She didn't. Not about the ceremony, not about the flowers imported from the southern provinces at ridiculous expense, and certainly not about the man standing across from her looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. The entire production was a performance, and she'd learned a long time ago that survival meant playing your part without complaint. The cathedral was suffocating. Incense hung heavy in the air, mixing with the cloying scent of white lilies that lined every column. Sunlight filtered through stained glass, casting fractured colors across marble floors, polished to a shine that hurt to look at. Every pew was packed with nobility, dressed in their finest. Silks, furs, enough jewelry to fund a small army. They weren't here for love. They were here because power demanded witnesses. Lydia's dress weighed approximately 30 pounds. She'd counted the pearl buttons running down her spine while the seamstresses fitted her 3 days ago. 47. Each one a tiny cage. The train stretched behind her like a white shadow, and the veil itched against her temples where they'd pinned it too tight. Her shoes were half a size too small. Everything about this moment was designed to remind her that she didn't belong here. Duke Rowan Ashford stood at the altar like he was carved from the same marble as the cathedral itself. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair pulled back in a style that probably had a fancy name Lydia didn't know. His coat was midnight blue, perfectly tailored, every button polished. He looked like the kind of man who'd never had a hair out of place in his entire life. When their eyes met, his expression was completely neutral. Not hostile, not kind, just empty. Like she was a contract he was signing, not a person. The officiant droned through the vows. Lydia barely heard them. She was too busy cataloging exits. 2 main doors at the entrance, currently blocked by the crowd. Side chapel to the left, probably locked. Vestry behind the altar, possible, but she'd have to get past Rowan first, and something told her that wouldn't be easy. "Do you, Lydia Marin Hale, take this man?" "I do." She cut him off. No point dragging it out. The officiant blinked, thrown off his rhythm, but recovered quickly. "And do you, Rowan Callister Ashford, Duke of Northaven?" "I do." Rowan's voice was granite. Final. There. Done. The crowd murmured approvingly, a soft rustle of expensive fabric and satisfied whispers. Lydia watched a woman in the 3rd row dab at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, and wondered what exactly she thought she was crying about. Romance? Tradition? The woman didn't know Lydia. Didn't know that 6 weeks ago, Lydia had been living a completely different life. Quieter, smaller. But at least it had been hers. Then her father's debts came due, and suddenly she was a solution to someone else's problem. The officiant smiled like he'd personally orchestrated world peace. "By the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you—" "Before we finish," Rowan's voice cut through the ceremony like a blade. Everyone froze. Lydia felt her stomach drop, but she kept her face perfectly still. This was it. Whatever move he'd been planning, this was it. Rowan turned to face the congregation, and Lydia saw something flicker in his jaw. Tension, maybe. Or anger. Hard to tell with a face that controlled. "I want to make something clear," he said, voice carrying easily through the vaulted space. "This marriage is a political arrangement. Nothing more. And effective tomorrow morning, I will be filing for annulment." The silence that followed was so absolute, Lydia could hear her own heartbeat. Then the whispers started. A rising tide of shock, confusion, barely concealed glee from the people who lived for scandal. Lydia watched it spread through the pews like wildfire. Wide eyes, hands flying to mouths, heads turning to neighbors for confirmation of what they'd just heard. The officiant looked like he might pass out. Your Grace, this is highly irregular. Noted in the records. Rowan's tone left no room for argument. Then he turned back to Lydia, and for the first time she saw something in his eyes. Not cruelty. Worse. Duty. He believed he was doing the right thing. You'll be provided for. A residence in the city, a reasonable allowance. You won't be left destitute. Lydia stared at him. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a small, rational voice was screaming at her to respond, to do something, but the rest of her was stuck on one detail. He'd waited until now. Until she was standing in front of 300 witnesses dressed like a prize doll, with vows still hanging in the air. He could have told her this morning, yesterday, a week ago, but he'd waited until the exact moment it would humiliate her most. Lydia? Her father's voice somewhere behind her, thin, worried. She didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge him. Instead, she looked at Rowan and said, very quietly, "Is that all?" He frowned like he'd expected tears, anger, something other than this. "Yes." "Then we're done here." She turned to the officiant, who was still frozen in shock. "Finish it." What?" "The ceremony." Her voice was flat. "You were in the middle of pronouncing us married. Finish it." The officiant's mouth opened and closed like a fish. He glanced at Rowan, who gave a single curt nod. Permission, of course. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." No applause this time. Just stunned silence as Lydia reached up, pulled the veil off her head, pins catching painfully in her hair, and let it drop to the floor. Then she turned and walked down the aisle, train dragging behind her like a funeral shroud. The crowd parted. Of course they did. Nobody wanted to be associated with the scandal. She made it to the cathedral steps before her father caught up with her. "Lydia, wait! Don't!" She kept walking, heels clicking against stone. "Please, just listen." She stopped, turned. Lawrence Hale looked older than she remembered, grayer. The lines around his eyes had deepened into crevasses, and his coat, expensive once, now worn at the cuffs, hung loose on a frame that had lost weight it couldn't afford to lose. "You knew," she said. "I didn't. They told me it was a standard arrangement. I thought—" "You thought what exactly? That a duke would marry your indebted daughter out of the goodness of his heart?" She laughed, and it came out sharp enough to cut. "You sold me, father. Let's at least be honest about that." His face crumpled. "I had no choice. The creditors were going to take everything, the house, the land. So you gave them me instead." "Lydia, please. Where am I supposed to go?" The question came out harder than she intended. "He's divorcing me tomorrow. I can't go back to the house. You don't have a house. I'm legally bound to a man who just announced to the entire capital that I'm disposable. So where exactly do I go?" Lawrence opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Because there was no answer. There had never been an answer. This had been the plan all along. Marry her off, clear the debts, hope she landed somewhere soft. The fact that she hadn't was just bad luck. "The Duke's estate," someone said behind her. Lydia turned. A woman stood 3 steps up, mid-40s, dressed in a charcoal traveling coat that looked practical rather than fashionable. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she had the kind of face that gave away nothing: sharp cheekbones, pale eyes, a mouth set in a permanent line of disapproval. "Excuse me?" Lydia said. "You're asking where you go. The answer is the Duke's estate, Ashford Manor, 20 miles north of the capital." The woman descended the steps with brisk efficiency. "I'm Mrs. Thorne, head housekeeper. I've been instructed to escort you there immediately." "By who?" "By His Grace." Mrs. Thorne's tone suggested the question was idiotic. "You're his wife, legally. Until tomorrow, you reside in his household." Lydia glanced back at the cathedral. Through the open doors, she could see Rowan talking to a cluster of older men, probably advisors, maybe family. He wasn't even looking in her direction. "And after tomorrow?" she asked. Mrs. Thorne's expression didn't change. "That's above my position to speculate. But for tonight, you're the Duchess of Northaven. Act like it." The carriage ride took 3 hours. Lydia spent the first hour staring out the window, watching the capital shrink behind them. The city gave way to farmland, then forest. then rolling hills that looked like they'd been painted by someone who'd never seen actual countryside. Everything was too green, too perfect, unreal. Mrs. Thorne sat across from her, reading a small leather-bound ledger and making occasional notes with a pencil that she kept razor sharp. She hadn't spoken since they left, and Lydia was fine with that. Conversation seemed pointless. Around the second hour, the silence started to itch. "How long have you worked for him?" Lydia asked. Mrs. Thorne didn't look up. 12 years. "Is he always like that?" "Like what?" "Cold." Now Mrs. Thorne did look up, and there was something almost amused in her eyes. "His Grace is disciplined. There's a difference. He humiliated me in front of the entire court. He stated facts in front of witnesses. If you feel humiliated, that's your interpretation." Mrs. Thorne went back to her ledger. "My advice? Don't waste energy on feelings. You've got one night in that house. Use it." "For what?" "Survival." Mrs. Thorne flipped a page. "Same as the rest of us." Lydia leaned back against the seat and closed her eyes. Survival. Right. Because that's what this was. Not a marriage, not a life. Just another fight to stay standing. When she opened her eyes again, the manor was visible through the trees. It was massive. Gray stone, Gothic architecture, at least 50 windows on the front facade alone. Towers flanked either side like sentries, and the grounds stretched out in every direction. Manicured gardens, a fountain, what looked like a hedge maze in the distance. The kind of place that required an army to maintain. The carriage rolled to a stop in front of the main entrance. Mrs. Thorne stepped out first, then turned and offered Lydia a hand. "Welcome to Ashford Manor," she said, voice absolutely neutral. "Try not to make a mess." The staff was lined up on the steps. 20 people, maybe more, all dressed in identical black and white. They stood at attention like soldiers, faces blank, hands clasped in front of them. Lydia felt their eyes tracking her as she climbed down from the carriage, and she forced herself to stand straight, shoulders back, chin up. The dress was still too heavy, the shoes still too tight, but she'd be damned if she let them see her stumble. Mrs. Thorne gestured to the line. "Your household, for one night, for as long as you're here." Mrs. Thorne started walking, and Lydia followed. Groundskeeper, gardeners, stable hands, kitchen staff, housemaids, footmen. "You'll meet them formally tomorrow if there's time. For now, just know they're watching." "Why?" "Because you're an unknown, and unknowns are dangerous." They entered through a set of doors that looked like they could withstand a siege. The entry hall was enormous. Marble floors, a double staircase curving up to the second floor, portraits lining the walls. Lydia recognized some of the faces from history books. Ashford lineage, going back at least 2 centuries. Every one of them looked stern, powerful, untouchable. "Your rooms are in the east wing," Mrs. Thorne said, leading her up the stairs. "His Grace's chambers are in the west. You won't cross paths unless you go looking for it." "Not planning on it." "Good. Makes things simpler." They walked down a corridor lined with more portraits, more history. Lydia tried to imagine living here, waking up in these halls, eating at tables that could seat 30, wandering rooms that served no purpose other than showing off wealth. It felt like a museum. Beautiful, cold, and utterly lifeless. Mrs. Thorne stopped in front of a door and pushed it open. "Your suite." It was bigger than Lydia's entire childhood home. 4-poster bed, sitting area, writing desk by the window, an adjoining bathroom that probably had better plumbing than half the city. Everything was decorated in shades of cream and gold, tasteful and expensive and completely impersonal. "Dinner is at 7, Mrs. Thorne said. "You'll dine alone unless His Grace decides otherwise, which he won't. A maid will come to help you change." "I don't need help." Mrs. Thorne raised an eyebrow. "You're wearing 47 buttons down your back. You absolutely need help." She turned to leave, then paused. "A word of advice, Lady Ashford. The staff here are loyal to the Duke. Don't expect allies, and don't cause trouble. It won't end well for you." Then she was gone, and Lydia was alone. She stood in the center of the room for a long moment, just breathing. Then she walked to the window and looked out at the grounds. From here, she could see the hedge maze, the gardens, a small lake in the distance. It was beautiful, peaceful, the kind of place poets wrote about. It felt like a prison. Dinner arrived at 7 sharp. A maid, young, maybe 18, knocked softly and entered with a tray. Roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread, wine. Enough food for 3 people. She set it on the small table near the fireplace, curtsied, and left without a word. Lydia ate mechanically. The food was good, probably the best she'd ever had, but it tasted like ash. She kept replaying the ceremony in her head. Rowan's voice, the crowd's reaction, her father's helpless expression. Tomorrow I'm divorcing you. Fine. Let him. She'd figure something out, she always did. After dinner, she tried the door to the hallway. Unlocked. That was something. She wandered the corridor, counting doors, memorizing the layout. If she was only here for one night, she might as well learn the escape routes. She found the library by accident. 3rd door on the left, massive room filled floor to ceiling with books. A fire crackled in the hearth, and the air smelled like leather and old paper. Lydia stepped inside, running her fingers along the spines. History, philosophy, military strategy. No novels, no poetry. Just the kind of books a man like Rowan would collect. Practical, useful, devoid of imagination. Looking for something? She spun around. Rowan stood in the doorway, still dressed in the same coat from the ceremony, though he'd loosened his collar. He looked tired, which surprised her. She didn't think dukes got tired. Just exploring, she said. This is a private wing. Your housekeeper said I was the Duchess. Doesn't that make it my wing too? His jaw tightened. For tonight. Right, tomorrow. She turned back to the shelves. Don't worry, I'll be gone before you notice. Silence. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate. He walked to the fireplace and stared into the flames. I didn't want to humiliate you. Could have fooled me. I wanted to be clear. This arrangement, it's not what either of us wanted. No, Lydia agreed. But you got to decide when and how it ended. I just got to stand there and take it. He looked at her then, really looked. And for a second she thought she saw something crack in that iron composure. Guilt, maybe. Or just irritation that she wasn't making this easy. You'll be taken care of, he said. I meant what I said. A residence, an allowance. I don't want your money. Then what do you want? She laughed, sharp and bitter. I wanted a choice. But I don't get those, apparently. Rowan's expression hardened. Neither do I. This marriage was forced on both of us. If you think I wanted to wake up and find out I'd been maneuvered into a political trap, then why go through with it? She turned to face him fully. If you hated the idea so much, why show up? Why say the vows? Book it. Because breaking the contract would have meant war between my house and your father's creditors, between families who've been circling each other for years, waiting for an excuse. He ran a hand through his hair, the first uncontrolled gesture she'd seen from him. I chose the option that kept people alive, even if it meant marrying someone you can't stand. I don't know you well enough to stand you or not, he said it plainly, without malice. But I know what happens when powerful people feel betrayed, and I wasn't about to start a bloodbath over a wedding. Lydia studied him. He believed what he was saying. She could see it in the set of his shoulders, the exhaustion in his eyes. He thought he was the reasonable one, the pragmatic one, doing the hard thing for the greater good. And maybe he was. Maybe this was all just politics and survival, and nobody actually gave a damn about her. Fine, she said quietly. You did what you had to do. So did I. Tomorrow you'll undo it, and we can both move on. Exactly. But for tonight, I'm still your wife, so if you don't mind, I'd like to finish looking at your library in peace. He hesitated, like he wanted to argue, but eventually nodded. Don't stay up too late. Mrs. Thorne will have you up at dawn. Then he left, and Lydia was alone again. She pulled a book off the shelf, military history, something about naval battles, and sat in the chair by the fire. She didn't read it, just held it, staring at the flames, thinking. Tomorrow. One more night, and then she'd be free. Free to figure out what the hell came next, free to stop being a pawn in someone else's game. But as the fire crackled and the manor settled into silence around her, Lydia couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow wasn't going to be as simple as either of them thought. And she was right. The next morning, Lydia woke to shouting. She bolted upright, heart hammering, trying to orient herself. Sunlight streamed through unfamiliar windows. Right. The manor. The marriage. More shouting, downstairs. Men's voices, angry. She threw off the covers and grabbed the robe someone had left draped over a chair. Her feet hit cold floor as she crossed to the door and opened it a crack. The noise was coming from the main hall. She crept down the corridor, staying close to the wall, until she could see over the banister. Rowan stood at the bottom of the stairs, still in yesterday's clothes, facing three men she didn't recognize. Older, well-dressed, radiating the kind of authority that came from inherited power. One of them, gray beard, scarlet coat, was jabbing a finger at Rowan's chest. "You made a commitment," the man snarled. "You can't just dissolve it because you're having second thoughts." "I'm not having second thoughts. I'm correcting a mistake." "A mistake?" Another man, this one bald with a pinched face. "You married the girl in front of witnesses. That's not a mistake, that's a contract. A contract built on false pretenses." Rowan's voice was ice. "The terms were misrepresented. I was told Lydia Hale was a political necessity. I wasn't told she was a pawn in your debt scheme." The third man, tall, thin, with cold eyes, smiled. "Does it matter? She's your wife now, legally. And if you divorce her, you'll be breaking agreements that go far beyond one wedding. Then those agreements were lies too. Semantics." The gray-bearded man leaned in. "You want to know what happens if you annul this marriage? The Hale debts default. Your mother's family loses their shipping contracts. 3 minor houses collapse, and the political vacuum tears the northern provinces apart. Is that what you want? Chaos because you couldn't stomach one unwanted wife?" Lydia's fingers tightened on the banister. Rowan's expression was unreadable. "You're threatening me." "We're reminding you of reality." The bald man glanced up and his eyes locked on Lydia. "Ah, the Duchess. Good morning." Everyone turned. Lydia froze, every instinct screaming at her to retreat, but it was too late. They'd seen her, and now Rowan was staring at her with something between frustration and resignation. "Go back to your room," he said quietly. "No." She descended the stairs, forcing herself to move slowly, deliberately. When she reached the bottom, she looked at the three men. "Who are you?" The gray-bearded man smiled. "Lord Verne, and these are Lord Cullen and Lord Merivale. We're associates of your husband. Associates who arranged my marriage without my knowledge. Politics rarely waits for permission, dear girl." "Don't call me that." Her voice came out colder than she intended. "And don't pretend this was anything other than a transaction. You needed to move money and power around, and I was convenient. At least have the decency to admit it." Verne's smile didn't waver. "Very well. Yes. You were a solution to multiple problems. Your father's debts, our political positioning, the Duke's need for a stabilizing marriage, all resolved in one ceremony. Efficient, don't you think? And what happens when he divorces me?" "He won't." Cullen, the bald one, said it with absolute certainty. "Because he's smarter than that." Lydia looked at Rowan. He was staring at the floor, jaw working like he was trying to chew through steel. "You're trapped," she said softly. His eyes met hers. "So are you." "Then we have something in common." Verne clapped his hands together. "Excellent. Now that we're all on the same page, let's discuss the next steps." "Oh, son, get out!" Rowan's voice cut through the room like a whip. Everyone froze. "Your Grace," Merivale started. "I said get out. Now." The three men exchanged glances. Then, moving with the unhurried confidence of people who knew they'd already won, they headed for the door. Verne paused on the threshold, looking back at Rowan. "Think carefully about your next move, Your Grace. Some cages are easier to accept than break." Then they were gone. Rowan stood in the center of the hall, hands clenched into fists, breathing hard. Lydia watched him, wondering if he was going to punch something. Instead, he looked at her and said, very quietly, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For all of it." He sank into a chair by the wall, head in his hands. "I thought I was being clever, thought I could outmaneuver them. But they were 3 steps ahead the whole time." Lydia sat across from him. "So what now?" "I don't know." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, birds were singing. The sun was shining. It was a beautiful morning. Inside, they were both trapped. "We could run," Lydia said finally. Rowan looked up. "What?" "Run, leave, disappear. You said it yourself. This marriage is a cage, so let's break it. And go where? They'll find us, drag us back, make an example. Or we stay. She leaned forward. And we figure out how to play the game better than they do. Rowan stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You want to stay? I want to survive. And right now, this manor is the safest place for both of us. So yeah, I'll stay. If you stop treating me like an inconvenience. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. You're serious? Completely. He studied her for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. All right, we stay. But we do this my way, carefully, strategically. No impulsive moves. Agreed. And if this falls apart, then we both go down fighting. For the first time since she'd met him, Rowan smiled. It was small, barely there, but real. Deal, he said. And just like that, the war began. The manor didn't sleep. Lydia discovered this her second night there, when she wandered downstairs at 2 a.m. looking for water and found half the staff still moving through the halls like ghosts, a maid carrying linens, a footman checking locks. Mrs. Thorne in the kitchen, reviewing inventory by candlelight with a severity that suggested the fate of nations hung on proper spoon counts. Can't sleep? Mrs. Thorne asked without looking up. Lydia filled a glass from the pitcher on the counter. Is it always like this? Like what? Active, at night. A house this size doesn't maintain itself. Mrs. Thorne made a note in her ledger. His Grace runs a tight operation. Everything on schedule, everything accounted for. Staff who can't keep up don't last long. Sounds exhausting. Sounds disciplined. Mrs. Thorne finally looked at her. Which is more than I can say for the previous household management. Lydia leaned against the counter. There was someone before you? 3 someones. None lasted more than a year. The Duke has exacting standards. She closed the ledger with a decisive snap. But standards keep things from falling apart. You'd do well to remember that. I'll keep it in mind. Will you? Mrs. Thorne stood, gathering her papers. Because tomorrow you're meeting with the household staff, formally. His Grace wants you integrated into the daily operations. Lydia nearly choked on her water. What? You're the Duchess. That means responsibilities. The staff needs to know you're not just decorative. Mrs. Thorne's expression didn't change, but there was something almost challenging in her eyes. Unless you'd prefer to hide in your rooms and prove Lord Verne right, that you're just a pawn with no real function. The comment landed like a slap. Lydia set down the glass carefully. What time? 8 sharp, don't be late. Then she was gone, leaving Lydia alone in the kitchen with the uncomfortable realization that she'd just been maneuvered into something she didn't understand. The meeting took place in what Mrs. Thorne called the morning room, though it looked more like a military command center. Long table, chairs arranged with geometric precision, windows letting in cold morning light that made everyone look slightly ill. The entire household staff was assembled, 23 people, Lydia counted, sitting in uncomfortable silence while she stood at the head of the table feeling like a fraud. Rowan sat to her right, dressed in another immaculate coat, expression unreadable. He'd barely spoken to her since their agreement yesterday. Just a curt nod at breakfast, a brief, "we'll discuss strategy later," that never materialized. Now he was watching her like he expected her to fail spectacularly. Mrs. Thorne handed her a stack of papers. Weekly reports, kitchen expenses, groundskeeper requests, maintenance issues. Standard review. Lydia stared at the documents. Numbers, lists, complaints about broken fence posts and spoiled meat deliveries, and a leaking roof in the east wing. It was mind-numbing. She flipped through the pages, aware that everyone was watching, waiting for her to do something. The kitchen expenses are too high, she said finally. The head cook, a massive woman named Mrs. Pemberton, with flour permanently embedded in her apron, bristled. We feed 40 people 3 meals a day, Your Grace. Quality ingredients cost money. I'm sure they do. Lydia scanned the numbers again. But you're spending twice the budget on meat alone. Either your supplier is gouging you, or someone's skimming off the top. Silence. Mrs. Pemberton's face went red. I would never... I didn't say you were. Lydia kept her voice level. I said someone is. And if you're not checking the invoices against actual deliveries, you wouldn't know. Mrs. Thorne leaned forward slightly. How did you... My father ran a merchant operation before the debts buried him. I spent 10 years watching him track shipments and negotiate contracts. You learn to spot discrepancies. She slid the report across to Mrs. Pemberton. Check your last month's deliveries. Count what actually arrived. I guarantee you'll find a gap. Mrs. Pemberton took the paper, still glaring, but there was uncertainty in her eyes now. She nodded once and sat back down. Lydia moved to the next report. Groundskeeper request for new tools. Reasonable. Maintenance issue with the roof. She flagged it as urgent. Request from the head groom for additional stable hands. Denied, Rowan said. She looked at him. The stables are understaffed. You've got 12 horses and 2 stable hands. That's not sustainable. The budget doesn't allow for additional hires. Then reduce the number of horses. His expression hardened. Those horses are military grade, bred for speed and endurance. I'm not selling them because the stable needs better management. Then hire another hand. I said no. The room had gone very quiet. Lydia could feel the staff watching, measuring the distance between her and Rowan, trying to figure out who actually held power here. She set down the papers. Can we discuss this privately? There's nothing to discuss. The decision is final. Fine. She turned to the head groom, a wiry man in his 50s with permanent mud stains on his boots. What's your name? Thomas, Your Grace. Thomas, how many hours are you working per day? He shifted uncomfortably. 16, ma'am. Sometimes more. And the other hand? Same. Lydia looked at Rowan. You're running them into the ground. That's not discipline, that's cruelty. And when one of them collapses or makes a mistake that gets a horse injured, you'll pay more in veterinary costs than a third salary would have cost you all year. Rowan's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he might actually lose his temper, but instead he stood abruptly. We're done here. Mrs. Thorne, dismiss the staff. Mrs. Thorne nodded, and the room emptied in under a minute. Lydia stayed where she was, arms crossed, waiting. When they were alone, Rowan turned on her. Don't contradict me in front of the household. Don't make stupid decisions, and I won't have to. Stupid! He stopped himself, visibly reigning in anger. You've been here 3 days. You don't understand how this estate operates. I understand exploitation when I see it. Those men are killing themselves because you won't allocate resources properly. Resources are finite. Every hire, every expense, it all comes from somewhere. And right now we're hemorrhaging money trying to keep up appearances while Lord Verne and his cronies circle like vultures. Then stop trying to keep up appearances. She moved around the table toward him. You want to outmaneuver them? Stop playing by their rules. Hire the stable hand. Fix the roof. Show the staff you're not just managing them like assets. You're actually paying attention. And that helps us how? Loyalty. She said it simply. Right now, this household runs on fear and routine. People do their jobs because they're terrified of getting fired. But if you actually invest in them, if you show them you care whether they live or die, they'll fight for you. And when Verne makes his next move, you'll have an entire estate full of people who won't sell you out. Rowan stared at her. You think it's that simple? I think it's a start. He was quiet for a long moment, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Then finally, fine, hire the stable hand, but you're managing the budget adjustments. If we go over, it comes out of your allowance. I don't have an allowance yet. Then I guess you'd better not screw this up. He left before she could respond. Lydia stood alone in the morning room, heart still hammering from the confrontation, and realized she'd just won something. Small, maybe, just a single staff hire, but it was a crack in the wall, proof that Rowan could be moved if you pushed the right way. Mrs. Thorne appeared in the doorway. That was bold. That was necessary. Was it? Mrs. Thorne's expression was unreadable. You do realize you just made yourself responsible for this estate's finances. If the numbers don't balance, I'll make them balance. And if you can't? Lydia met her eyes. Then I'll figure something else out. Same as always. Mrs. Thorne almost smiled. Almost. Follow me. If you're going to manage the budget, you need to see the full ledgers. And I should warn you, they're worse than you think. She wasn't exaggerating. The estate office was a cramped room off the main library, stuffed with filing cabinets and stacks of paper that looked like they hadn't been organized since the previous century. Mrs. Thorne pulled out 3 massive ledgers and dropped them on the desk with a thud that raised dust. 5 years of records, she said. Income, expenses, debts, investments, everything. Lydia opened the first ledger and felt her stomach drop. Red ink everywhere. The estate was bleeding money, not just from daily operations, but from loans, bad investments, and what looked like deliberate sabotage. Payments to vendors who didn't exist, salaries for staff positions that had been eliminated years ago, entire sections of the budget that made no sense. "How is he keeping this place running?" she asked. "Barely." Mrs. Thorne leaned against the desk. His Grace inherited a mess. The previous Duke, his father, was more interested in reputation than reality. Spent a fortune on parties and gifts and political maneuvering, all while the foundation rotted. By the time Rowan took over, the estate was on the verge of collapse. And Verne knew that. Lord Verne knows everything. That's his specialty. He finds powerful people with weak spots and exploits them. Mrs. Thorne's expression darkened. "Your marriage was leverage, a way to tie Rowan to financial obligations he can't escape. As long as he's married to you, he's tied to your father's debts, which Verne controls." Lydia closed the ledger carefully. "So if Rowan divorces me, the debts come due immediately, and your father's creditors, who are all Verne's people, will dismantle everything. The estate, the title, probably Rowan's life." Mrs. Thorne's voice was flat. "He can't divorce you without destroying himself. And Verne knows it. Then we need to find a way to pay off the debts. With what money? We're barely covering operational costs as it is." Lydia opened the ledger again, flipping through pages, looking for something, anything, that didn't fit the pattern. There. A series of payments marked as charitable donations, all going to an organization called the Westbrook Foundation. 50,000 crowns every quarter for 3 years. "What's the Westbrook Foundation?" she asked. Mrs. Thorne frowned. "I don't know. His Grace handles those payments personally." "Does that seem strange to you?" "Everything about this estate seems strange, Your Grace. You'll need to be more specific." Lydia circled the entry with her finger. "Charitable donations in the middle of a financial crisis. Either Rowan's incredibly generous or incredibly stupid, and I don't think he's stupid." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we find out what he's actually paying for." Mrs. Thorne hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I can make inquiries, quietly." "Do it." The housekeeper left, and Lydia sat alone with the ledgers, running calculations in her head. The numbers were bad, but not unsalvageable. If she could trim expenses here, renegotiate contracts there, maybe redirect some of those mysterious donations, it was possible. Difficult, maybe impossible, but possible. She was still working when Rowan appeared in the doorway 3 hours later. "You missed lunch," he said. "I was busy." She didn't look up from the ledger. "Mrs. Thorne said you were reviewing the finances." "Someone should." He crossed the room and looked over her shoulder at the pages covered in her notes, crossed out numbers, recalculations, question marks next to suspicious entries. "You're restructuring the entire budget." "I'm trying to. Your current system is a disaster. It's kept us afloat for 5 years." "Barely." She finally looked at him. "Did you know you're paying for 12 staff positions that don't exist anymore?" His expression flickered, surprise then something darker. "That's not possible." "It's documented. Right here." She pointed to the entries. "Salaries going out every month to people who either quit or were fired years ago. Someone's pocketing the difference." Rowan leaned over the desk, scanning the numbers. His face went carefully blank, but she saw his hands tighten on the edge of the desk. "Who has access to these payments?" "According to Mrs. Thorne, only you and your estate manager." "Garrett." The name came out like a curse. "Where is he?" "I don't know. I haven't met him yet. He's supposed to report weekly. I haven't seen him in—" Rowan stopped, calculating. 3 weeks? Maybe 4. When did the discrepancies start? He flipped back through the ledger, and Lydia watched his expression shift from anger to something closer to dread. 6 months ago, right after what? "Right after I refused Lord Verne's proposal to merge our estates under a joint management agreement." Rowan straightened, jaw set. "He's been sabotaging me. Through Garrett." "Probably." Lydia closed the ledger. "Question is, can you prove it?" "If I can find Garrett, yes." "And if you can't? Then I'm running an estate with a traitor in the administration and no way to verify which records are real." He looked at her, and for the first time she saw genuine worry in his eyes. This is worse than I thought. Then we fix it. She stood, gathering the ledgers. I'll cross-reference every entry with actual deliveries and staff rosters. Anything that doesn't match, we flag. Meanwhile, you find Garrett and get answers. And if he runs, then you make an example of him, publicly. Show Verne that you're done playing nice. Rowan studied her for a long moment. You're good at this. At what? Strategy. You see the board the way I do. I see survival. Everything else is just details. She handed him one of the ledgers. Now go. I've got work to do, and so do you. He took the ledger, hesitated like he wanted to say something else, then left. Lydia sat back down and opened the next set of records. Her eyes were burning, her head ached, and she hadn't eaten since breakfast. But she kept working because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant acknowledging just how deeply trapped they both were. Outside, storm clouds were gathering. The confrontation came faster than expected. Lydia was in the garden 3 days later, reviewing groundskeeper reports and trying to understand why the hedge maze required its own dedicated budget, when a carriage rolled up the main drive. Black, expensive, with the Verne family crest emblazoned on the door. Mrs. Thorne appeared at her elbow. He's early. Who? Lord Verne. He wasn't expected until next week. Lydia watched the carriage stop at the front entrance. Does Rowan know? He's in the city. Won't be back until tonight. Perfect. Lydia stood, brushing dirt off her skirt. Where would Verne expect to meet the Duchess? The drawing room. But, Your Grace, perhaps you should wait until… No. Lydia started toward the house. If Verne's here early, it's because he thinks I'm alone and vulnerable. Let's prove him wrong. She had 15 minutes to prepare. Mrs. Thorne helped her change into something more formal, a dark green dress that actually fit, hair pulled back in a style that looked deliberate rather than desperate. When Lydia checked her reflection, she barely recognized herself. She looked like a duchess, poised, controlled, absolutely nothing like the terrified girl who'd walked down the aisle a week ago. One more thing, Mrs. Thorne said, handing her a small folder. The Westbrook Foundation records. I got the information you requested. Lydia opened the folder and felt her blood run cold. Are you certain about this? She asked. Confirmed through 3 separate sources. Does Rowan know? I don't believe so. Lydia closed the folder. Then let's keep it that way. For now. She entered the drawing room to find Lord Verne examining a portrait of Rowan's grandfather with the casual interest of someone inventorying future property. He turned when she entered, and his smile was all teeth. Lady Ashford, how delightful. I was hoping we'd have a chance to speak privately. I'm sure you were. Lydia sat in the chair by the fireplace, Rowan's chair, she'd noticed, the one positioned to see both doors. What brings you to Ashford Manor, Lord Verne? Concern. I heard troubling rumors about the estate's finances. Thought I should check in personally. He settled into the chair across from her, completely at ease. How are you finding married life? Educational. I'm sure. The Duke is a demanding man. High standards, rigid expectations. Must be exhausting trying to keep up. I manage. Do you? Verne leaned forward slightly. Because from what I hear, you've been making quite a few changes. Questioning budgets, challenging decisions, inserting yourself into household management. Bold moves for someone who's only been here a week. Someone needs to notice when the estate's being robbed. The smile froze on his face. Excuse me? Garrett, your man. The one you planted as estate manager to embezzle funds and destabilize Rowan's finances. Lydia kept her voice perfectly level. Did you think we wouldn't notice? Or did you just assume we'd be too distracted by the marriage drama to look at the numbers? Verne's expression went very still. That's a serious accusation. It's a documented fact. I've got ledgers, invoices, and a paper trail that leads directly back to accounts you control. Want me to show you, or would you prefer to pretend we're both idiots? For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then he laughed, a genuine, delighted sound. You're sharper than I expected. When I arranged this marriage, I thought you'd be decorative at best. Turns out you're actually useful. I'm not here to be useful to you. No, you're here because you have nowhere else to go. Your father's broke. You've got no family, no allies, no prospects outside this estate. You need the Duke far more than he needs you. Verne stood, brushing invisible dust from his coat. So here's my offer. Work with me. Feed me information about Rowan's plans, his finances, his weaknesses. In exchange, I'll make sure you're taken care of when this all falls apart. And if I refuse, then you go down with him. Simple as that. Lydia stood as well, meeting his eyes. Get out. Think about it. I said get out, now, before I call the groundskeepers and have you removed. Verne's smile turned cold. You're making a mistake, girl. I gave you a chance to be smart. The door slammed open. Rowan stood in the doorway, still in his traveling coat, expression like murder. She told you to leave. Verne turned smoothly. Your Grace, I heard exactly what you were doing. And if you ever threaten my wife again, I will end you, financially, socially, in every way that matters. Are we clear? For the first time, Verne looked uncertain. He glanced between Rowan and Lydia, recalculating. Perfectly clear. Then get the hell off my property. Verne left without another word. The silence that followed was deafening. Rowan stood with his fists clenched, breathing hard, staring at the empty doorway like Verne might reappear. Lydia waited, giving him space to process whatever fury was burning through him. Finally, he looked at her. How much did you tell him? Nothing. I confronted him about Garrett and the embezzlement. He tried to recruit me as a spy. And you refused. Obviously. Why? The question caught her off guard. What do you mean, why? He was trying to sabotage you. He was offering you an escape. Safety. Security. Everything you don't have right now. Rowan crossed the room toward her. Why would you throw that away to protect someone you barely know? Lydia met his gaze. Because I'm not a coward. And because if I let men like Verne win, I'll spend the rest of my life being someone's pawn. I'd rather go down fighting. Something shifted in his expression. You meant what you said, about staying and playing the game. Did you think I didn't? I thought... He stopped himself, running a hand through his hair. I don't know what I thought, but you just made yourself Verne's enemy. He won't forgive that. Good. Then he'll know I'm serious. Rowan laughed, short, surprised, almost helpless. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Can't I be both? Probably. He walked to the window, staring out at the grounds. Garrett's gone. Disappeared completely. I've got people looking, but my guess is Verne already moved him somewhere we can't reach, which means we have no proof, no witness, and no way to stop the financial bleeding until I can completely restructure the estate management. Then we restructure. It'll take months, maybe longer, and the whole time Verne will be circling, looking for weaknesses. Let him circle. Lydia moved to stand beside him. We've got something he doesn't. What's that? Each other. She said it simply, factually. You're good at strategy. I'm good at numbers. Together, we might actually survive this. Rowan looked at her, really looked, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something other than duty in his eyes. Respect, maybe. Or the beginning of trust. All right, he said quietly. We do this together. But that means no more secrets. If you find something, you tell me. If I make a decision, I run it by you first. We operate as a unit. Agreed. And Lydia? His voice softened slightly. Thank you for refusing Verne. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. She turned back to the window. Because whether we like it or not, we're in this together. And I don't leave people behind. The storm broke that night. Real rain this time. Lashing against the windows and turning the grounds into a muddy mess. Lydia lay awake in her rooms, listening to thunder roll across the hills, and thought about Verne's offer. She could have said yes. Could have taken the easy path, played both sides, secured her own future. Nobody would have blamed her, but she'd looked into Rowan's eyes that morning and seen the same exhaustion she felt, the same trapped desperation. And somewhere in that moment, she'd made a choice. Not about love, not about loyalty, just about refusing to be the kind of person who sold out when things got hard. The folder Mrs. Thorne had given her was still on her nightstand. She picked it up, reading through the documents again by candlelight. The Westbrook Foundation wasn't a charity, it was a front. For what, she wasn't entirely sure yet, but the payments Rowan had been making weren't donations. They were blackmail. Someone had leverage over him, and he'd been paying to keep it quiet for 3 years. She needed to know what it was. Needed to understand what she was really fighting for, but that meant confronting Rowan. and she wasn't sure he'd tell her the truth. Tomorrow, she decided. Tomorrow she'd ask. Tonight, she'd let him have his secrets. The rain hammered harder, and somewhere in the distance, lightning split the sky. Morning came with pale, watery light and the smell of wet earth. Lydia dressed quickly, the folder tucked under her arm like evidence at a trial. She found Rowan in his study, bent over a map of the northern provinces with the kind of focus that suggested he hadn't slept either. He looked up when she entered. "You're up early." "So are you." She closed the door behind her. "We need to talk." "About Verne?" "About the Westbrook Foundation." His entire body went rigid. The mask slipped, just for a second, and she saw something close to panic flash across his face before he locked it down. "How did you—" "I asked Mrs. Thorne to investigate the charitable donations in your ledgers, the ones bleeding 50,000 crowns every quarter." She set the folder on the desk between them. "Turns out, they're not donations at all." Rowan stared at the folder like it might explode. "You had no right." "I had every right. You made me responsible for the budget. That includes understanding where the money's going." She opened the folder, spreading the documents across his map. The Westbrook Foundation is registered to a shell company in the Southern Territories. No board members listed, no public records, no actual charitable work. Just a bank account that you've been filling for 3 years. So, I'll ask once, what are you paying for? He didn't answer, just stood there, jaw working, hands braced on the desk. "Rowan." Her voice was quieter now. "If we're doing this together, I need to know what I'm fighting, all of it." The silence stretched so long she thought he might actually refuse. Then he walked to the window, staring out at the rain-soaked grounds, and said, "My brother." Lydia blinked. "You have a brother?" "Had. Officially." He didn't turn around. "Garrett Ashford, younger than me by 3 years. He was supposed to inherit a smaller estate in the eastern provinces, standard arrangement for second sons, but he had other ideas." "What kind of ideas?" "The kind that involve gambling debts, black market deals, and eventually treason." Rowan's voice was flat, emotionless. 5 years ago, he got involved with a group planning to destabilize the Northern Territories. Sell intelligence to foreign powers, profit off the chaos. The Crown found out. They were going to execute him. Lydia felt something cold settle in her chest. "What did you do?" "I made a deal. The Crown would spare his life, exile instead of execution, but only if he disappeared completely. No contact, no acknowledgement, nothing. As far as the world knows, Garrett Ashford died in a riding accident." He finally turned to face her. "The Westbrook Foundation is his lifeline. I send money, he stays hidden. If I stop paying, he resurfaces. And if he resurfaces, the Crown considers our deal void, which means they come for him, and probably me, for harboring a traitor. So you've been bleeding the estate dry to keep your brother alive and out of sight." "Yes." "And Verne knows about this." Rowan's expression darkened. "I don't know how much he knows, but he's been poking at the edges for months, asking questions, making comments. If he finds proof, he'll use it to destroy you." Lydia sat down heavily in the chair by the desk. "This is what he's been waiting for. Not the marriage, not the debts. This." "Probably." Rowan moved to the liquor cabinet, poured 2 glasses of whiskey even though it was barely 8 in the morning, and handed her one. "So now you know. My family's greatest shame, the secret that could end everything." She took the glass but didn't drink. "Does anyone else know? Mrs. Thorne, the staff?" "No one, just me, and now you." "Why tell me?" "Because you asked. And because you were right, no more secrets." He drank, grimaced. "Besides, you would have figured it out eventually. You're too stubborn not to." "Flattery won't save you. I'm aware." He sat across from her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely exhausted. Not just tired, hollowed out. "I've been managing this for 5 years, trying to keep the estate afloat, protect Garrett, stay ahead of people like Verne who'd love nothing more than to watch me fall. And it's not working. The money's running out, the lies are piling up, and now you're caught in the middle of it." Lydia studied him. Somewhere under all that rigid control was someone who actually gave a damn about his brother. Stupid, reckless, traitorous brother who'd nearly destroyed everything. And Rowan had sacrificed years of his life trying to save him. "We stopped paying," she said. He looked at her like she'd suggested burning down the manor. What? The Westbrook payments. We stop. Immediately. Lydia, if we stop, Garrett will do exactly what he's been doing. Hiding. Because he's not an idiot. He knows if he surfaces, he dies. She leaned forward. Think about it. You've been sending him money for 3 years. Has he ever contacted you, asked for more, threatened to expose himself? No. Because he doesn't want to die either. The payments aren't keeping him quiet. They're just draining resources you desperately need. She tapped the folder. This is leverage Verne can use against you, but only if the payments continue. If you stop now, claim the foundation was fraudulent, and you've only just discovered it, you cut the connection. No proof, no trail. And abandon my brother. Your brother abandoned you the moment he committed treason. Her voice was harder than she intended, but she didn't soften it. I'm sorry. I know you care about him, but right now he's a liability you can't afford. And if you keep trying to save him, you'll both drown. Rowan stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back. He's family. So is this estate. So are the people depending on you to keep it running. So am I, apparently. She stood as well, blocking his path. You want to be the honorable duke who saves his brother and protects his people and outmaneuvers Verne? Fine, but you can't do all three, so choose. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair, but it's the reality. He stared at her, and she could see the war happening behind his eyes. Duty versus love. Pragmatism versus loyalty. Finally, he said, very quietly, if I cut the payments and something happens to Garrett, then it happens, and you live with it, same as you've been living with every other impossible choice. She didn't move. But at least you'll have a chance of survival. Keep bleeding money to the Westbrook Foundation, and you're just delaying the inevitable. Rowan closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he looked older. All right, we stopped the payments, but I need to send one final transfer, enough to last him 6 months. Give him time to adjust. 1 month. Any more and Verne will notice the pattern change and start asking questions. Fine. 1 month. He drained his glass. I hope you're right about this. So do I. The decision hung between them like smoke. Lydia wanted to say something comforting, something that would ease the guilt she could see etching itself into his face. But there was nothing. Sometimes survival meant cutting loose the people you loved. It wasn't noble. It wasn't fair. It just was. There's something else, Rowan said, breaking the silence. I got word this morning. The Crown is sending an auditor. Lydia felt her stomach drop. When? 2 weeks. Maybe less. They want to review the estate's finances, verify everything's legitimate. His expression was grim. If they find discrepancies, the missing payments, Garrett's connection, any hint of the embezzlement, they'll shut us down. Seize the estate, dissolve the title, possibly arrest me for fraud. Can we fix the books in 2 weeks? Not without help. And everyone I'd normally hire is either too expensive or too connected to Verne. Lydia's mind raced. 2 weeks to clean up 5 years of financial chaos, eliminate evidence of blackmail payments, and present a coherent picture to a Crown auditor who'd be looking for any excuse to find fault. It was impossible, which meant they had to do it anyway. We need someone outside the system, she said. Someone with no connection to Verne or the noble families. Someone who can work fast and keep their mouth shut. Do you have someone in mind? Maybe. She was already moving toward the door. Give me 3 hours, and pray I'm not wrong about this. The carriage ride into the city took 90 minutes. Lydia spent the entire trip staring out the window, trying to remember streets and landmarks from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. The city had changed since her father's business collapsed, or maybe she'd just never noticed how dirty it was. Smoke from factories hung over everything, turning the sky gray. The streets were crowded with people who looked tired, hungry, desperate. She found the office in a narrow building wedged between a butcher shop and a boarding house. The sign above the door was faded but legible. Harrow and Associates, Accounting Services. Inside, the office was cramped and smelled like old paper and cheaper whiskey. A man sat behind a desk covered in ledgers, mid-50s, balding, with ink stains on his fingers, and the kind of slouch that came from years of staring at numbers. He looked up when she entered, squinted, then did a double take. Lydia Hale? He stood, nearly knocking over his chair. I thought you were... I heard you got married. I did. It's Ashford now. She closed the door behind her. Hello, Marcus. Marcus Harrow had been her father's accountant back when there was still a business to account for. He'd tried to warn Lawrence that the debts were unsustainable, that the investors were vultures, that everything was heading toward collapse. Lawrence hadn't listened. By the time he finally did, it was too late, and Marcus had already moved on to other clients. What are you doing here? Marcus asked, gesturing to a chair that looked like it might collapse under its own weight. I heard you married into the Ashford estate. Figured you'd be living like royalty. It's complicated. She sat carefully. I need your help. With what? 5 years of estate finances, complete restructuring, 2 weeks to make it audit-proof. Marcus whistled low. That's not a job, that's a suicide mission. I know, but you're the only person I trust who can actually do it. He sat back down, studying her. The Ashford estate is a mess, Lydia. Everyone in accounting knows it. Debts piled on debts, investments that went nowhere, management that couldn't balance a checkbook. Why would I want to dive into that disaster?
But what sure are you?
Because I'll pay you double your normal rate. And because if we don't fix this, the Crown's going to seize everything and probably throw the Duke in prison, which means I'll be back to where I started, broke, unmarried, and unemployable. And if the audit finds something you missed, something we can't hide, then we all go down together, but at least we tried. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, fingers drumming on the desk. Then he opened a drawer, pulled out a bottle of whiskey, and poured himself a shot. You always were too stubborn for your own good. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. Let me see the books first. If they're as bad as I think, I walk. If there's a chance, even a small one, I'll consider it. He downed the shot. But Lydia, I need you to be honest. Is this just financial chaos, or is there criminal activity involved? She thought about Garrett, the embezzlement, the blackmail payments. Then she looked Marcus in the eye and said, there are irregularities, some intentional, some not, but nothing that can't be explained if we present it right. It wasn't quite a lie, just a very optimistic interpretation of the truth. Marcus sighed. All right, I'll come look at the books. But if I don't like what I see, I'm out. No arguments. Fair enough? They shook on it, and Lydia felt something loosen in her chest. It wasn't hope, not quite, but it was close. When she returned to the manor, Rowan was waiting in the entry hall. He took one look at her face and said, You found someone. Maybe. He wants to see the books first. When? Tomorrow. I need to send a carriage back to the city to pick him up. Done. Rowan gestured toward the study. There's been a development. You need to see this. Inside the study, Mrs. Thorne was standing next to a young maid Lydia vaguely recognized. Sarah, maybe? The girl looked terrified, eyes red from crying, hands twisting her apron into knots. What's going on? Lydia asked. Tell them what you told me, Mrs. Thorne said, not unkindly. The maid's voice was barely a whisper. I saw someone. Last night. In the East Wing. Rowan straightened. Who? I don't know. It was dark, and I was just checking the windows like Mrs. Thorne told me after the storm. But I saw someone moving through the corridor, someone who wasn't supposed to be there. A staff member? No, Your Grace. I know everyone on staff. This was someone else, taller, moving like they knew the layout. Lydia and Rowan exchanged glances. Did they see you? Lydia asked. I don't think so. I hid behind the linen closet until they passed. Then I ran straight to Mrs. Thorne. Good. Rowan's voice was calm, but Lydia could see tension in every line of his body. You did the right thing. Go with Mrs. Thorne now. She'll make sure you're safe. Mrs. Thorne ushered the girl out, leaving Lydia and Rowan alone. Verne, Lydia said. Has to be. Either him or someone working for him. They're looking for something. The Westbrook records? Probably, or anything else they can use as leverage. Rowan walked to his desk, pulled out a set of keys. We need to move everything sensitive to a secure location. Tonight. Where? There's a vault in the cellar, old, reinforced, only accessible through a passage behind the wine storage. No one knows about it except me. And now me. And now you. He handed her a key. Help me gather everything. Ledgers, contracts, correspondence. Anything Verne could twist into evidence against us. They worked through the afternoon and into the evening, combing through years of documents. Some went to the vault. Others, the ones too innocuous to matter, stayed in place to maintain appearances. Lydia's back ached. Her fingers were cramped from sorting papers, and she'd lost count of how many trips they'd made to the cellar. Around midnight, Rowan found something that made him go very still. "What is it?" Lydia asked. He was holding a letter, old and creased, the wax seal broken. "This is from my father, to Garrett, written 6 months before the treason charges." "What does it say?" Rowan read aloud, voice tight. "You're going to destroy this family. I don't know what game you're playing with those foreign contacts, but it ends now. Sever the connections, return the money, and pray the Crown doesn't find out. If they do, I won't protect you. You're on your own." "Your father knew," Lydia breathed. "He knew and did nothing. Didn't warn the Crown, didn't stop Garrett, just threatened to cut him loose." Rowan crumpled the letter in his fist. "And 6 months later, he was dead. Heart attack, they said. But now I wonder if Garrett had something to do with it? If the stress of covering for a traitor killed him, yes." Rowan's voice was hollow. "My father spent his whole life building this estate, protecting the family name, and his own son destroyed it from the inside." Lydia didn't have words for that. She just took the crumpled letter and added it to the vault pile. They finished around 2 in the morning. The vault was packed, the study looked ransacked but normal, and they were both so exhausted they could barely stand. "Get some sleep," Rowan said. "Tomorrow's going to be worse." "How could it possibly be worse?" "Because tomorrow we start restructuring 5 years of financial records with an auditor breathing down our necks and Verne actively trying to sabotage us. So, yes, worse." "Great." Lydia headed for the door, then paused. "Rowan?" "Yeah?" "We're going to survive this." He looked at her, and something almost like a smile crossed his face. "You sound certain." "I'm not. But if I say it enough times, maybe it'll be true. Let me know if that works." She left him there, alone in the study, and climbed the stairs to her rooms. Every muscle screamed protest, but her mind was already racing ahead, calculations, strategies, contingency plans for when everything inevitably went wrong. Sleep didn't come easy. When it did, it was full of nightmares about auditors and burning ledgers and Verne's cold smile. Marcus Harrow arrived the next afternoon with 2 assistants and a wagon full of equipment. He took one look at the estate's financial records and went pale. "This is worse than I thought." "Can you fix it?" Lydia asked. "Fix? No, nobody could fix this, but I might be able to make it look functional enough to survive an audit." He set his assistants to work sorting documents. "I need complete access, every ledger, every invoice, every scrap of paper related to money coming in or going out. You'll have it. And I need to know what we're hiding." Lydia glanced at Rowan, who nodded slightly. "The Westbrook Foundation payments, embezzlement by the previous estate manager, some creative accounting to cover operating costs when the budget didn't stretch." Marcus rubbed his temples. "Anything else?" "Isn't that enough?" "For a normal audit, yes. For a Crown audit specifically targeting this estate? No. They're going to dig deep, so if there's anything that could surface, I need to know now." Rowan and Lydia exchanged looks. Finally, Rowan said, "There may be questions about my brother's death if they dig into family records." "The brother who died in a riding accident 5 years ago? That's the official story?" "Yes." Marcus went very quiet. Then he closed the ledger he'd been examining and looked at Rowan. "I'm not asking for details, but I need to know, is there documentation that contradicts the official story?" "Not anymore. We moved everything sensitive to a secure location last night." "Good. Keep it that way. And pray the auditor doesn't have access to Crown intelligence records, because if they cross-reference family deaths with exile orders, they won't find anything," Rowan said firmly. "The deal was sealed. Garrett Ashford is legally dead." "Then we work with that." Marcus turned back to his assistants. "All right. We've got 12 days. Let's see if we can make this disaster look like simple mismanagement instead of fraud." The work was brutal. Marcus and his team effectively moved into the estate, working 18-hour days sorting, recalculating, and reconstructing financial narratives that wouldn't immediately trigger alarms. Lydia worked alongside them, cross-referencing invoices with actual deliveries, flagging discrepancies, building explanations for every suspicious entry. Rowan handled the political side, making sure Verne and his allies didn't catch wind of the audit preparation, maintaining the illusion that everything was normal. It meant attending social functions, hosting dinners, playing the role of unshakable duke while their entire foundation crumbled beneath them. On the 8th day, Marcus found something that stopped him cold. "Lydia, you need to see this." She looked up from the inventory reports she'd been reconciling. Marcus was holding a contract dated 3 years back signed by both Rowan and someone named Edmund Verne. Her blood went cold. "What is it?" "A loan agreement, 50,000 crowns, borrowed from Lord Verne to cover estate operating costs. Interest rate of 12%, compounding annually. Repayment due in full within 5 years. That's... Lydia did the math in her head and felt sick. "That's nearly 90,000 crowns. When is it due?" Marcus checked the contract. 6 weeks from now." The room tilted. Lydia sat down hard in the nearest chair. "Does Rowan know about this?" "If he does, he didn't mention it to me, and it's not in the main ledgers. This was buried in a separate file marked settled contracts. But it's not settled. According to this, no payments have been made at all, because he couldn't afford them." Lydia's mind raced. He was already drowning in debts, the Westbrook payments, the embezzlement, the operational costs. He took the loan as a stopgap and then couldn't pay it back. And in 6 weeks, Verne can call it due, which means Verne owns him. Lydia stood abruptly. "Where's Rowan?" "In the city. Some dinner with the provincial governors. Get him back here. Now." Marcus sent one of his assistants to fetch the Duke. Lydia spent the next hour pacing the study, contract in hand, fury building with every circuit of the room. Rowan had told her no more secrets. They were supposed to be operating as a unit, and he'd left out the single most dangerous piece of leverage Verne had over them. When Rowan finally arrived 2 hours later, still in formal dinner attire, he took one look at her face and knew. "You found the Verne contract." "You lied to me." "I didn't lie. I just didn't—" "You said no more secrets," her voice cracked. "We agreed. Everything on the table. And you left out the fact that you owe Verne 90,000 crowns that you can't possibly pay back." "I was handling it. How? By ignoring it and hoping it went away?" She threw the contract on the desk between them. "In 6 weeks, he can seize this entire estate. Everything we've been fighting for. Gone. And you didn't think that was worth mentioning? I didn't want you to panic." "I'm not panicking. I'm furious." She crossed her arms. "What was your plan? Wait until the day before it's due and then admit you're bankrupt?" "I was trying to renegotiate the terms. Buy more time." "With what leverage? He knows you can't pay. He's been waiting for this moment." Rowan slammed his hand on the desk. "What do you want me to say? That I screwed up? Fine, I screwed up. 3 years ago, I was desperate and I took a loan from the only person offering. I thought I could fix the estate finances before it came due. I was wrong. So what do we do now?" "I don't know." The admission hung between them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Marcus cleared his throat from the doorway. "There might be a way." They both turned. Marcus was holding another set of documents, expression grim. "I found something in your mother's estate records. A trust fund, established before her death, meant to be released to you upon your 30th birthday." Rowan frowned. "I don't turn 30 for another 2 years." "I know, but the trust contains approximately 120,000 crowns, more than enough to pay off Verne and still have operating capital left over. Then why haven't I had access to it?" "Because there's a stipulation. The trust only releases early if you're married, and the marriage has lasted at least 6 months. Marcus looked between them. "Which means if you can make it to month 6 without divorcing, we can pay off Verne." Lydia finished the thought, mind already calculating. "When's the 6-month mark?" 4 months from now," Rowan said quietly. 2 months after the loan comes due. Can we negotiate an extension? Not without revealing why we need it. And the moment Verne knows about the trust, he'll do everything possible to force the divorce before we can access it." Lydia paced again. "So we stall. Find excuses, delay the payment, keep him from calling the loan until we hit the 6-month mark. That's 2 months of walking a tightrope. Better than the alternative." Rowan looked at Marcus. Is the audit preparation going well enough that we can survive scrutiny? If they come in the next 3 days, we're dead. If they wait until after day 12, we might have a chance. Then we buy time there too. I'll contact the Crown, request a delay due to... He paused, thinking. Due to recent staff restructuring. Claim we're implementing new accounting systems and need 2 weeks to finalize. That might work, Marcus said. But only once. After that, they'll just show up unannounced. Then we make it count. Rowan turned to Lydia. Can you keep the estate running while I deal with politics? Can you stop keeping secrets? He met her eyes. No more secrets, I swear it. Fine, then yes. I'll keep things running. The next 2 weeks were a blur of controlled chaos. Marcus and his team worked around the clock, transforming 5 years of financial disaster into something that resembled legitimate estate management. Lydia coordinated with Mrs. Thorne to keep daily operations smooth while also learning every detail of the restructured finances so she could answer auditor questions if needed. Rowan played politician, attending functions, making appearances, carefully dropping hints that the Ashford estate was implementing modernized accounting practices to deflect suspicion. He also met with Verne twice, both times managing to avoid direct discussion of the loan by steering conversation toward other political matters. But the tension was building. Lydia could feel it every time Verne's name came up, every time a servant mentioned seeing unfamiliar carriages near the estate, every time the mail arrived with another letter marked with that damn scarlet seal. On day 11 of the audit preparation, everything nearly fell apart. Lydia was in the study reviewing final ledger corrections when Mrs. Thorne burst in without knocking. Your Grace, there's someone here, at the front gate, demanding entry. Who? He says his name is Garrett Ashford. The world stopped. Lydia's first coherent thought was, no, not now. Not when we're this close. Her second was, Rowan is going to lose his mind. She stood carefully, forcing her voice to stay level. Where is he? Still at the gate. The guards are holding him there until we confirm. Keep him there. Don't let him pass the perimeter, and find the Duke immediately. Mrs. Thorne nodded and left at a near run. Lydia walked to the window, staring out at the grounds. Somewhere beyond the hedge maze, beyond the gardens and the carefully maintained lawns, Rowan's dead brother was very much alive and demanding entry. This was Verne's play. Had to be. Somehow he'd found Garrett, convinced him to surface, and now he was using him as a weapon to destroy everything they'd built. Rowan appeared 15 minutes later, face like stone. Where is he? Front gate. Hasn't been allowed in yet. Good. He didn't elaborate, just headed for the door. Lydia grabbed his arm. Wait. Think about this. The moment you acknowledge him, he's my brother. He's a traitor who's been legally dead for 5 years. And if Verne has any proof he's alive, if there are witnesses to this meeting, I don't care. Rowan pulled free. I'm not leaving him at the gate. Then at least let me come with you. 2 witnesses are better than 1 if this goes wrong. He hesitated, then nodded. Fine, but stay behind me. If things get dangerous, I know. Run. They took one of the smaller carriages, Lydia driving because Rowan's hands were shaking too badly to hold the reins properly. The gate was visible from half a mile away, and so was the figure standing just outside it. Garrett Ashford looked like his brother's shadow. Same height, same build, but thinner, harder. His clothes were travel-worn, his hair too long, and there was something wild in his eyes that made Lydia's instincts scream danger. Rowan stepped down from the carriage before it fully stopped. Garrett. Hello, brother. Garrett's smile didn't reach his eyes. Surprised to see me? Surprised you're stupid enough to show your face here. I got a letter. Very interesting letter. Said you'd stop my payments. Thought I'd come ask why. Lydia felt ice slide down her spine. Verne. It had to be Verne. Who sent you the letter? Rowan asked, voice carefully controlled. A friend. Someone who thinks you've been playing games you can't win. Garrett stepped closer to the gate. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to restart those payments. Double them, actually. And in exchange, I'll go back to being dead. Refuse, and I'll walk into the Capitol tomorrow and tell everyone exactly who I am. They'll execute you. Maybe. Or maybe I'll tell them about the deal you made. How you helped a traitor escape justice. How you've been funding an exile for 5 years. How the Honorable Duke of Northaven is actually... Rowan moved so fast Lydia barely saw it. One moment he was standing at the gate. The next, His hand was through the bars, gripping Garrett's collar, slamming him against the iron. "You have 10 seconds to get off my property," Rowan said, voice deadly quiet. "After that, I call the Crown Guard and have you arrested on sight." Garrett laughed, a broken, manic sound. "You won't. Because if I go down, you go down with me. Then we both go down. But at least I'll have the satisfaction of watching you hang first." For a long moment they stared at each other through the gate. Then Garrett jerked free, stumbling back. "You're going to regret this." "I already do." Garrett turned and walked away, disappearing into the tree line. Lydia watched until he was completely gone, then looked at Rowan. His hands were still gripping the gate, knuckles white. "He's going to the capital," she said quietly. "I know. We have to stop him." "How? Send assassins after my own brother? Bribe the Crown to ignore him?" Rowan let go of the gate, turning to face her. "There's no good option here. Either I let him destroy us or I destroy him first. Or we beat him to the capital. Tell the Crown ourselves. Control the narrative before Garrett can poison it." Rowan stared at her. "You want me to confess?" "I want you to get ahead of this. Garrett's story will be revenge, a bitter brother lashing out. Your story can be duty, a duke who made an impossible choice to prevent bloodshed." She moved closer. "We still have the auditor coming. If we can survive that, show the Crown that the estate is solvent and well managed, then frame Garrett's exile as an act of mercy rather than treason. That's a hell of a gamble. Everything we've done has been a gamble." She didn't break eye contact. "But this way, we control the game. Garrett just gave us a deadline, so let's use it." Rowan was quiet for so long she thought he might refuse. Then, finally, he nodded. "All right. We go to the capital, together, and we pray we're fast enough to outrun the explosion." They climbed back into the carriage, and Lydia drove them back to the manor in silence. Behind them, storm clouds were gathering again, real ones this time, dark and heavy with the promise of violence. And somewhere in those shadows, Garrett Ashford was planning his revenge. The capital looked different when you were racing against your own destruction. Lydia watched the city materialize through the carriage window, spires and smokestacks, narrow streets packed with people who had no idea that somewhere in that chaos, a dead man was planning to resurrect himself and burn down everything she'd been fighting for. Beside her, Rowan sat rigid, jaw clenched so tight she thought his teeth might crack. "We go to the Crown Administrator first," he said for the third time. "Present the facts cleanly, no emotion." "You've said that already." "I'm reminding myself." His hands were fists on his knees. "If I think too hard about Garrett, about what he's doing, I'll lose focus, and we can't afford that." Lydia understood. She had spent the entire 2-hour journey doing the same thing, pushing down panic, building walls between herself and the reality that they were about to confess to crimes that could end with Rowan in chains. Maybe her too, if the Crown decided she'd been complicit. The Crown Administrator's office was housed in a building that looked like it had been designed to intimidate. Gray stone, narrow windows, guards at every entrance wearing expressions that suggested they'd seen everything and been impressed by none of it. Lydia followed Rowan through corridors that smelled like old paper and power, trying to project confidence she absolutely didn't feel. The administrator himself was a thin man in his 60s with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. His name was Aldrich Thorne, no relation to Mrs. Thorne, thankfully, and he greeted them with the kind of cool politeness that was somehow worse than outright hostility. "Your Grace, Lady Ashford, this is unexpected. We need to speak with you urgently," Rowan said, "regarding a matter of Crown security." Thorne's expression didn't change, but something sharpened in his gaze. "I see. Please, sit." They sat. Lydia's heart was hammering so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. Rowan didn't waste time. 5 years ago, my brother Garrett Ashford was charged with treason. The Crown agreed to commute his execution to exile in exchange for his complete disappearance. I facilitated that arrangement. "I'm aware," Thorne said calmly. "Your father negotiated the terms before his death. You simply honored them. I also funded Garrett's exile. For 3 years. Through an organization called the Westbrook Foundation." Now Thorne's eyebrows rose slightly. "Go on." "Recently I discontinued those payments. And yesterday Garrett appeared at my estate, threatening to expose himself unless I resume funding him, at double the previous amount." Rowan's voice was absolutely level. I refused, which means there's a strong possibility he's currently in the capital, preparing to reveal himself and undermine the exile agreement. Thorne steepled his fingers. And you're here to report this before he does. Yes. Why? The question hung in the air. Lydia could see Rowan struggling with how to answer. Too much truth, and he looked weak. Too little, and he looked calculating. She decided to speak instead. Because my husband made a choice 3 years ago to protect his brother at significant personal cost, she said. But he's not willing to bankrupt his estate and betray the Crown's trust to continue that protection. Garrett made his decisions. Rowan's making his. Thorne looked at her with interest. You're defending him. I'm stating facts. Facts that could result in your husband being charged with obstruction. If you were going to charge him, you'd have done it already. You're not surprised by any of this. Lydia leaned forward slightly. Which means you knew. About the Westbrook payments. Probably about Garrett's location. You've been watching the whole time. A ghost of a smile crossed Thorne's face. The Crown maintains extensive intelligence networks, Lady Ashford. Very little escapes our notice. Then why allow it to continue? Because a duke quietly managing a family embarrassment is preferable to public scandal. Garrett Ashford alive and hidden is less disruptive than Garrett Ashford publicly executed. Thorne shifted his attention back to Rowan. But now he's threatening to surface, which changes the calculation. What do you need from us? Rowan asked. Nothing. We'll handle Garrett. He won't reach the noble quarter. We have people tracking him already. By nightfall, he'll be back in exile. Permanently, this time. You're going to kill him. We're going to ensure he can't threaten Crown security again. The method is not your concern. Thorne stood, signaling the meeting was over. Your cooperation is noted, Your Grace. Continue managing your estate responsibly, and this matter will be forgotten. Rowan stood as well, but Lydia could see tension in every line of his body. That's it? You just handle it? Would you prefer we didn't? I prefer to know my brother isn't going to be murdered in an alley somewhere. Your brother committed treason. The fact that he's still breathing is a courtesy, not a right. Thorne's voice hardened. You came here to report a threat. We're addressing it. Be grateful we're not addressing your role in prolonging it. Lydia touched Rowan's arm gently. We should go. He didn't move for a long moment. Then finally, he nodded. Thank you for your time, Administrator. They left the building in silence. The carriage was waiting where they'd left it, but Rowan walked past it, heading toward the river district. Lydia followed, giving him space to process whatever war was happening in his head. Eventually, he stopped at a low wall overlooking the water. The river was brown and sluggish, full of refuse and the detritus of city life. Boats drifted past, carrying cargo, their captains shouting at each other in languages Lydia didn't recognize. He's going to die because of me, Rowan said quietly. He's going to die because he committed treason, and then threatened to commit more. I could have kept paying him, found a way to make it work. For how long? Another year? 5, 10? Lydia leaned against the wall beside him. You were bleeding yourself dry to keep him safe, and he thanked you by trying to extort double. That's not family, that's just cruelty. He's still my brother. I know. She didn't have anything else to say. Some pain didn't have solutions, just endurance. They stood there for a long time, watching the river flow past. Finally, Rowan straightened. We need to get back. The auditor's coming in 3 days. Can we survive it? Marcus thinks so. If the books hold up to scrutiny, then we better make sure they do. They returned to the estate to find chaos. Not the dramatic kind. No fires, no invasions, no bodies. Just the quiet, grinding chaos of an operation falling apart at the seams. Marcus met them at the door, face gray with exhaustion. We have a problem. Of course we do, Rowan muttered. The auditor moved up the timeline. They're arriving tomorrow, not 3 days from now. Tomorrow. Lydia felt the floor tilt. How is that possible? Anonymous tip. Someone suggested the estate was preparing to hide evidence, so the Crown decided to surprise us. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. We're not ready. We're close, but there are still gaps. Invoices that don't match. Expenses that need better documentation. If they dig into those, then we give them something else to focus on, Lydia interrupted. What's the strongest part of our presentation? The operational improvements? The new stable hand, the roof repairs, the kitchen expense corrections. Everything you implemented in the past 2 weeks actually shows competent management. Then we lead with that. Make it the story. New Duchess comes in, identifies problems, implements solutions. The previous irregularities become evidence of old mismanagement, not ongoing fraud. Rowan looked at her. You want to take credit for fixing problems you didn't create? I want to give the auditor a narrative they can accept. Old regime was corrupt, new regime is cleaning house. It's cleaner than the truth and harder to argue against. Marcus nodded slowly. That could work. But you'd need to be able to answer detailed questions about every change, dates, costs, reasoning. I can do that. I've been living in those ledgers for 2 weeks. And if they ask about the Westbrook payments, we tell them the truth, that we discovered fraudulent charitable donations and immediately discontinued them. Investigation pending. Lydia looked at Rowan. That's not a lie. We did discover them. We did stop them. Everything else is just details they don't need. This is insane, Rowan said. This is survival, Marcus corrected, and it's the best option we have. So unless you've got a better idea… No, you're right. Rowan took a breath. All right, we do it Lydia's way. What do you need from me? Stay out of it, Lydia said bluntly. You're too close to the old problems. If the auditor asks you about Garrett or your father or any of the history, you'll either lie badly or tell too much truth. But me? I'm new. I can blame everything on previous management and act like I'm still learning the full scope. You want to face a crown auditor alone? I want to face them with Marcus backing me up and you available for reference if needed. But the primary narrative comes from me. She met his eyes. Trust me. Please. Rowan looked like he wanted to argue. Then something in his expression shifted. Resignation, maybe, or just exhaustion. Fine. It's your show. Our show, she corrected. I just get to deliver the opening act. They worked through the night. Marcus and his assistants triple-checked every document, flagging anything that might raise questions and building explanations for the ones that couldn't be hidden. Lydia memorized dates, figures, names, everything she'd need to sound competent and confident. Mrs. Thorne coordinated the household staff, making sure the manor itself looked impeccable. No dust, no disorder, nothing that suggested the chaos happening behind the scenes. Around 3 a.m, Lydia found herself alone in the study, staring at the reconstructed ledgers and wondering if this was going to work, or if she was about to destroy everything with spectacular failure. You're still awake. She looked up. Rowan stood in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee that smelled strong enough to strip paint. So are you, she said, accepting one. Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about Garrett, about what the crown's doing to him right now. Don't. She said it gently. You can't carry that, not tonight. When then? When is it acceptable to feel guilty about getting your brother killed? Never, and always. She sipped the coffee, grimaced at the bitterness. But right now, you need to focus on surviving tomorrow. Everything else comes after. He sat in the chair across from her, and for a long moment they just drank their coffee in silence. I never thanked you, he said finally. For what? For staying. When Verne offered you an out, you could have taken it. Probably should have taken it. But you stayed and fought, and now you're about to face a crown auditor to protect an estate that's not even really yours. It's mine enough. She set down her cup. Besides, where else would I go? Back to my father's creditors? Another political marriage? At least here I'm fighting for something I helped build. You helped save it. There's a difference. Maybe. She leaned back. Or maybe we're both just stubborn enough to think we can actually win this. And if we can't, then we go down swinging, but at least we'll go down together. Rowan smiled, small, genuine, the first real smile she'd seen from him in days. When did you get so philosophical? Around the time I married a duke and discovered my entire life was a conspiracy. Changes your perspective. He laughed, and the sound was startling in the quiet study. Then he reached across the desk and took her hand. Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you. For being here, for being… He paused, searching for words. For being the partner I didn't know I needed. Lydia squeezed his hand once, then let go. Don't get sentimental on me now. Save it for after we survive. Deal. They finished their coffee, compared notes one final time, and finally admitted that there was nothing more they could do. The performance would succeed or fail based on what they'd built. No amount of additional preparation would change that. The auditor arrived at precisely 9 in the morning. Her name was Celia Graves, and she looked like someone who'd been doing this job long enough to have seen every trick, every lie, every desperate attempt to hide corruption behind false smiles. Mid-40s, gray streaking her dark hair, dressed in a severe black coat that made her look like she was attending a funeral. She brought 2 assistants and enough document cases to fill a small wagon. Lydia met her in the morning room, Marcus at her side, Rowan conspicuously absent. Lady Ashford, I'm Auditor Graves. No pleasantries, no warmth, just facts. I'll need access to 5 years of financial records, personnel files, and operational documentation. I'd also like to tour the estate and interview key staff members. Of course, we've prepared everything you requested. Lydia gestured to the table, which was covered in neatly organized ledgers and files. These are the primary records. Mr. Harrow here is our accounting specialist. He can walk you through any specific questions. Graves studied the table, then Lydia, then Marcus. You brought in outside help. 2 weeks ago, when I discovered significant irregularities in the estate management. What kind of irregularities? Embezzlement by the previous estate manager, fraudulent vendor contracts, salary payments to non-existent positions. Lydia kept her voice level, professional. The previous Duke prioritized appearance over fiscal responsibility. I'm working to correct that. You've been married to Duke Ashford for how long? 3 weeks. Graves' eyebrow rose. And in 3 weeks, you've identified and corrected years of financial mismanagement? I've identified it. Correcting it is ongoing, but we've made significant progress. Lydia pulled out one of the reports she'd prepared. Kitchen expenses reduced by 30% through better vendor oversight. Roof repairs completed that had been delayed for 2 years. Staff expanded in understaffed areas while eliminating redundant positions. The estate is functioning more efficiently now than it has in half a decade. Impressive. If true, it's documented. Every change, every expense, every decision. She handed the report to Graves. You're welcome to verify all of it. Graves took the report, scanned it briefly, then set it aside. I'll need to speak with the Duke. He's available for specific questions, but I've been managing the day-to-day operations, so most of your answers will come from me. That's unusual for a duchess. It's unusual for a duchess to marry into a financial disaster and decide to fix it rather than flee, but here we are. Something almost like respect flickered across Graves' face. Very well. Let's begin with the ledgers. The interrogation lasted 6 hours. Graves went through every page, every entry, asking questions that ranged from basic accounting principles to pointed inquiries about specific transactions. Lydia answered what she could, deferred to Marcus when needed, and maintained an attitude of cooperative transparency that she hoped didn't look rehearsed. Around hour 3, Graves found the Westbrook Foundation payments. These charitable donations, she said, tapping the page. 50,000 crowns per quarter, to an organization with no public records. Explain. Lydia had prepared for this. We discovered those 3 weeks ago. I flagged them immediately as suspicious. Upon investigation, the Westbrook Foundation appears to be a shell organization, possibly created by the previous estate manager to embezzle funds. You discontinued the payments immediately and filed a report with the Crown regarding potential fraud. We're still investigating the full scope. Do you have documentation of this report? Marcus? Marcus produced a file. Inside was a formal complaint filed with the Crown Treasury Office outlining the suspicious payments and requesting investigation. It was dated 2 weeks ago, conveniently after they'd stopped the payments, but before Garrett's appearance. Perfectly timed to look proactive rather than reactive. Graves read it carefully. This is thorough. We take fraud seriously. Clearly, Graves made a note, then moved on. Around hour 5, she asked about Garrett. The previous Duke had 2 sons. Where's the younger? Lydia kept her expression neutral. Garrett Ashford died in a riding accident 5 years ago, before I married into the family. Convenient timing. I'm sorry? Shortly after he died, the estate's finances began deteriorating rapidly. One might wonder if there's a connection. I wouldn't know. I wasn't here. Lydia met Graves' eyes steadily. Is there something specific you're investigating? just gathering context. Graves made another note. The current Duke seems to have inherited quite a mess. Yes, which is why I'm working so hard to clean it up. By hour 6, Graves finally closed the last ledger. I'll need to tour the estate. Verify that the operational improvements you've described actually exist. Of course, Mrs. Thorne can guide you. The tour took another 2 hours. Lydia watched from the study window as Graves and her assistants moved through the grounds, checking the repaired roof, inspecting the stables, interviewing staff. Every step felt like waiting for a trap to spring. When Graves finally returned, her expression was unreadable. Lady Ashford, Duke Ashford. Rowan had joined them in the morning room, looking composed but tense. I've completed my preliminary review. And? Rowan asked. Your estate was a disaster, mismanaged, overleveraged, with evidence of systematic corruption spanning multiple years. Graves paused. However, the recent changes demonstrate competent oversight. The operational improvements are real. The financial restructuring, while incomplete, shows genuine effort to address systemic problems. Lydia felt something loosen in her chest but didn't let it show. My recommendation will be that the estate remains under Crown observation for the next 6 months, quarterly reviews to ensure continued progress. But barring any new evidence of fraud or misconduct, I see no reason to seize assets or dissolve the title. Rowan's relief was visible. Thank you, Auditor Graves. Don't thank me. Thank your wife. Without her intervention, I would have recommended immediate seizure. Graves looked at Lydia. You have a rare talent for organization, Lady Ashford. The Crown could use someone with your skills. I'm content where I am, Lydia said carefully. For now, perhaps. But if circumstances change, remember that offer. Graves gathered her documents. I'll submit my report by week's end. Expect regular follow-up audits. And Lady Ashford, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. This estate needs you. Then she was gone, and Lydia and Rowan were left standing in the morning room, staring at each other in stunned silence. We did it, Rowan said finally. We survived, Lydia corrected. There's a difference. I'll take it. Marcus appeared in the doorway, looking like he might collapse. She's recommending observation instead of seizure. That's what she said. Then we actually pulled it off. Against every reasonable expectation, He stopped, started laughing. I need a drink, or sleep. Possibly both. Sleep first, Lydia advised. Drink after. Marcus nodded and wandered off, still laughing quietly to himself. Rowan turned to Lydia. You were incredible in there. I was prepared. You were more than prepared. You controlled the entire narrative, made her see what we needed her to see without ever lying. He shook his head. Graves was right. The estate does need you. The estate needs both of us, and a significant amount of luck. Lydia walked to the window. Outside, the grounds looked peaceful, normal, like the past 6 hours hadn't nearly destroyed everything. We're not safe yet. 6 months of observation, quarterly audits, one mistake, and they'll come down on us like judgment. Then we don't make mistakes. Rowan, we're drowning in debt. Verne still holds a loan we can't pay. Garrett's either dead or angrier than ever, and we have to maintain this facade for 6 more months before we can access your mother's trust. That's not a plan. That's a prayer. Then what do you suggest? She turned to face him. We go on a fence. Stop reacting to Verne's moves and start making our own. We can't pay the loan, but maybe we don't have to. Maybe we find leverage of our own. What kind of leverage? I don't know yet, but Verne's been playing this game for years. He's made enemies, left trails. If we can find something he wants hidden, we become as bad as he is. We become smart. There's a difference. She crossed her arms. I'm not suggesting we destroy innocent people, but Verne? He's fair game. And if taking him down is what keeps this estate alive, then that's what we do. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, sharp, dangerous, nothing like the controlled duke she'd married. All right. We hunt Verne. Where do we start? With the loan contract, there has to be something in the terms we can exploit. And we talk to people he's crushed before. Find out how he operates, where he's vulnerable. That could take weeks. We have 6 months. Let's use them. The next morning, news arrived from the capital. Garrett Ashford had been found dead in a boarding house on the River District. Official cause: complications from excessive drinking. No suspicious circumstances. No investigation required. Rowan read the report twice, then set it down carefully. He's really gone. Lydia didn't know what to say. The smart part of her brain noted that this solved multiple problems. No more blackmail threats, no more exile payments, one less vulnerability for enemies to exploit. But the human part recognized that Rowan had just lost his brother for the second time, and this time it was permanent. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Don't be. You were right. He made his choices." Rowan's voice was flat. "I just wish—" He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Lydia understood. You could know someone was poison and still grieve when they were gone. The Crown's being merciful about the death announcement, she noted, reading further in the report. No mention of treason or exile. Just an unfortunate accident. Courtesy to the family name, or maybe they're just covering their own involvement. He stood, moving to the window. Either way, it's over. That particular nightmare at least. Which leaves us free to focus on the others. Always the optimist. Always the realist. She joined him at the window. We won, Rowan. The audit, the investigation, keeping the estate. We actually won. For now. For now is better than never. She bumped his shoulder gently. Take the victory. We earned it. He looked at her, and something in his expression had shifted. The walls he'd been maintaining since the day they met, the rigid control, the emotional distance, were cracking. Not breaking, but cracking, letting something warmer through. We did, didn't we? Earn it. Against ridiculous odds and terrible planning, yes. Then I suppose we should celebrate. With what? We're still broke. With the knowledge that we're broke together, and that tomorrow we start fighting back. Lydia smiled. That might be the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Then you've had a tragic love life. You have no idea. They stood together at the window, watching the sun break through the morning clouds. And for the first time since this whole disaster began, Lydia felt something dangerous. Hope, not the naive kind. Not the belief that everything would magically work out. Just the hard-earned recognition that they'd survived the impossible once, which meant they could do it again. The Manor settled into an uneasy peace over the next week. Marcus and his team finished their contract and departed, leaving behind organized ledgers and a financial system that actually functioned. Mrs. Thorne relaxed slightly, though she still ran the household with military precision. Even the staff seemed to exhale, sensing that whatever crisis had been brewing had passed, for now. Lydia spent her days continuing what she'd started, streamlining operations, cutting costs, building the foundation of an estate that could actually sustain itself. And her evenings she spent with Rowan, going through every document related to Verne's loan, searching for weaknesses. They found one on the 8th day. Look at this. Rowan pointed to a clause buried in the contract's fine print. The loan is only callable if the estate defaults on operational expenses for 3 consecutive months. Lydia read it carefully. But we've been paying operational expenses. Barely, but consistently. Exactly. Which means Verne can't call the loan early. He has to wait until the 5-year mark. Unless he can force us to default, which he's been trying to do. The embezzlement, the sabotage, pushing us toward bankruptcy, all designed to trigger the default clause so he could seize everything early. But we didn't default. We survived. Lydia felt a smile spreading across her face. He can't touch us for another 2 months. And in 2 months, we hit the 6-month marriage mark and accessed the trust fund. They stared at each other as the realization sank in. They'd actually done it, survived long enough to reach the finish line. He's going to be furious, Lydia said. Absolutely livid, Rowan agreed. Good. The letter arrived 3 days later, delivered by a messenger in Verne livery. Rowan opened it in the study, Lydia reading over his shoulder. It was brief. Lord and Lady Ashford, I believe we should discuss the terms of your outstanding loan. I'm hosting a gathering at my estate this Saturday. Your presence is required. V. It's a trap, Lydia said immediately. Obviously, but we can't refuse without looking weak. Then we go, but on our terms. She thought quickly. We accept the invitation. Dress formally, arrive exactly on time, and present a united front. Show him we're not intimidated. And when he tries to corner us privately, we don't let him. Stay in public spaces, keep conversations short, and leave early. He wants to rattle us, so we stay unshakable. Rowan nodded slowly. It's risky. Everything we do is risky. This is just more public. Saturday arrived cold and clear. Lydia dressed in the finest gown the estate could afford. Deep blue silk that Mrs. Thorne had somehow produced from storage fitted perfectly, making her look like someone who belonged in noble circles. Rowan wore his formal Duke attire, and together they looked like a couple who had their lives completely under control. The illusion was perfect. The reality was they were walking into a room full of people who wanted to see them fail. Verne's estate was everything Ashford Manor wasn't. Ostentatious, modern, designed to impress rather than endure. The gathering was already in full swing when they arrived, at least 60 nobles circulating through rooms that glittered with wealth. Conversation stopped when they entered. Heads turned. Whispers started. "Ignore them," Rowan murmured. "Already am." Verne found them within 5 minutes. "Your Grace, Lady Ashford, how delightful that you could attend." His smile was all teeth. "I trust the auditor's visit went well?" "Well enough," Lydia said coolly. "We're cleared for continued operation." "How fortunate. Though I hear you're under observation for 6 months. Must be exhausting, living under such scrutiny." "We manage." "I'm sure you do." Verne's eyes glittered. "I was hoping we could discuss your loan repayment privately." "Actually, we've reviewed the contract terms," Rowan said. "The repayment isn't due for another 8 weeks, so there's nothing to discuss." Verne's smile froze. The spirit of the agreement, the letter of the law is what matters, and the law says 8 weeks. Rowan's voice was pleasant, but steel underneath. "Unless you're suggesting we rewrite legally binding contracts on a whim?" Several nearby conversations had stopped. People were listening now, watching this confrontation unfold. Verne's expression went very still. "Of course not. I simply wanted to ensure we were aligned on expectations." "We're perfectly aligned. You'll receive full repayment in 8 weeks. Until then, we have nothing further to discuss." Rowan took Lydia's arm. "If you'll excuse us." They walked away, leaving Verne standing alone, and Lydia could feel the shift in the room. The whispers had changed tenor. People weren't looking at them with pity anymore. They were looking with interest. Speculation. "That was bold," she murmured. "That was necessary. He needed to know we're not playing his game anymore." They circulated for another hour, making polite conversation, accepting congratulations on their marriage, deflecting questions about the estate with practiced ease. And slowly, Lydia noticed something changing. People who'd avoided them before were approaching now, asking questions, offering connections. One older woman, Lady Hartwick, prominent in trade circles, pulled Lydia aside. "I heard what you did with the estate audit. Impressive work." "Thank you." Verne's been a thorn in many people's sides for years. If you're interested in alternative sources of capital, I might be able to make introductions. Lydia's heart quickened. "I'm listening." "There are families who'd be very interested in supporting an estate that's successfully resisting Verne's control. Purely business, you understand, but beneficial to all parties. I'd be very interested in discussing that further." Lady Hartwick smiled. "I'll send a card. We should talk soon." When they finally left the gathering 2 hours later, Lydia's mind was racing. "Did you see it?" she asked as their carriage pulled away. "The power shift?" "Yes." Rowan leaned back, looking satisfied. Verne overplayed his hand. By calling us to his estate and then failing to intimidate us publicly, he showed weakness. And vultures like Hartwick are always watching for weakness. She offered to introduce us to alternative investors, people who'd back us against Verne. Did she specify terms? Not yet, but she will. Then we listen, carefully. He looked at her. "This is what you wanted, isn't it? Going on offense." "This is us surviving long enough to have options. The offense comes next." The carriage rolled through the night, and behind them, Verne's estate receded into the darkness. Somewhere in those glittering halls, a man who'd controlled their fates for months was realizing he'd lost his grip. And somewhere ahead, in the manor they'd fought so hard to keep, a future was beginning to take shape. Not the future they'd planned, not the one anyone expected, but theirs nonetheless. The week following Verne's gathering felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to see if the ground would hold or crumble. Lady Hartwick made good on her promise. 3 days later, a cream-colored card arrived, inviting Lydia to tea at an address in the merchant quarter. No mention of Rowan, just her. "She wants to see if you can hold your own," Rowan said, reading the card over breakfast. "Or if I'm just your puppet." Lydia spread jam on toast with more force than necessary. "Either way, I'm going." "I know, just be careful. These people don't offer help without expecting something in return." "Neither do we." The address turned out to be a private salon, expensive but understated, the kind of place where serious business happened away from prying eyes. Lady Hartwick was already seated when Lydia arrived, along with 2 other women Lydia recognized from social registers but had never actually met. "Lady Ashford, please, sit." Hartwick gestured to the empty chair. "This is Countess Marlowe and Duchess Kenrick. We've been discussing your situation." Lydia sat, keeping her spine straight, hands folded in her lap. "My situation. Your estate. The Verne loan. Your rather impressive survival of a crown audit that should have buried you." Marlowe was younger than Hartwick, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and sharper jewelry. "We're interested in how you managed that." "Hard work and honest accounting. And excellent timing," Kenrick added. She was older, 60s probably, with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded rooms without effort. "Stopping the Westbrook payments just before the audit. Filing fraud complaints at exactly the right moment. One might think you planned it. One might think I got lucky." "Luck is a resource," Hartwick said. "Same as capital or connections. The question is whether you know how to use it." Lydia met her gaze steadily. "What are you offering?" "Direct. Good." Hartwick poured tea like they were discussing weather. "We represent a coalition of families who are tired of Verne's manipulations. He's been using debt as a weapon for years, trap people in impossible loans, then seize their assets when they can't pay. Your estate is just his latest target." "And you want to help us out of kindness?" Marlowe laughed. "Kindness has nothing to do with it. We want Verne weakened. You surviving his schemes accomplishes that, so we're prepared to offer financing, enough to pay off his loan with room for operational improvements." "At what interest rate?" 5%. Fixed. 20-year term. Lydia's breath caught. That was less than half what Verne was charging. "And the catch? You join our coalition, share information about Verne's operations, help us build a case against his predatory lending practices." Kenrick leaned forward. "We're not asking you to spy. Just document what he's already done to you, contracts, correspondence, anything that shows his methods. You want to destroy him. We want to stop him from destroying others. There's a difference." Hartwick's expression was serious. "Verne has ruined at least a dozen estates in the past 5 years. Families bankrupted, titles dissolved, people forced into exile or worse. Someone needs to hold him accountable." "Why not go to the Crown directly?" "Because half the Crown's financial advisors are in Verne's pocket. We need undeniable evidence, multiple families, documented patterns, proof that can't be dismissed as isolated incidents." Marlowe pulled out a folder. "You'd be the third estate to join. We need at least 5 for the case to hold weight." Lydia took the folder, scanning the documents inside. Loan agreements, foreclosure notices, estate seizures, all bearing Verne's signature or his proxies. The pattern was clear, predatory, systematic, designed to maximize his control while appearing legitimate. "If I agree to this and Verne finds out, he'll come after you with everything he has," Kenrick said bluntly. "Which is why we move carefully, gather evidence quietly, build the case airtight before we strike. But Lady Ashford, if we succeed, you won't just survive Verne. You'll help bring down the system that enabled him." Lydia thought about the past 6 weeks, the humiliation at the altar, the desperate scrambling to save an estate she hadn't chosen, the constant fear that one mistake would destroy everything. And Verne, always circling, always waiting for her to break. She thought about other families going through the same thing, other women standing at altars, being traded like property to satisfy debts they didn't create. "I'll need to discuss this with my husband." "Of course. We're not asking for an immediate answer." Hartwick handed her a card. "But the loan offer expires in 2 weeks. After that, you're on your own with Verne." "Understood." Lydia left the salon with her mind racing. The offer was good, better than good, almost too good, which meant there had to be risks they weren't mentioning, but the alternative was facing Verne's loan deadline with no backup plan and dwindling options. She found Rowan in the library, surrounded by estate maps and correspondence. "How did it go?" he asked. She told him everything. The loan offer, the coalition, the evidence gathering. He listened without interrupting, expression growing more thoughtful with each detail. 5% is incredible, he said when she finished. We could actually breathe with terms like that. But joining the coalition makes us a target. Verne will see it as a declaration of war. We're already at war. This just gives us allies. He stood pacing. The question is whether we trust them. These women, they have their own agendas. Everyone does, including us. Fair point. He stopped at the window. What's your instinct? That we take the deal. Use their money to pay off Verne, then help them build the case. Not out of altruism, out of survival. Because as long as Verne has power, we're never truly safe. And if the coalition fails, if they can't actually bring him down, then at least we tried, and we'll still have a better loan than what he gave us. She moved to stand beside him. This is what we talked about, going on offense. This is our shot. Rowan was quiet for a long time, staring out at the grounds. Finally, he nodded. All right, we take the deal, but we're careful. Document everything, maintain plausible deniability, and if it starts going sideways, we pull out. Agreed. They drafted their acceptance that afternoon. 2 days later, Lady Hartwick's legal team arrived with contracts that were surprisingly straightforward. No hidden clauses, no suspicious terms, just a legitimate business loan with reasonable expectations. Lydia signed first, then Rowan. And just like that, they had the capital to pay off Verne's loan with 6 weeks to spare. We should do it publicly, Lydia said that night over dinner. The repayment. Make an event of it. Why? Because Verne tried to humiliate you at our wedding, announcing the divorce in front of everyone, making a spectacle of your authority. She set down her fork. So we return the favor. Pay off the loan in front of witnesses. Show everyone that he doesn't own us anymore. A slow smile spread across Rowan's face. You want to embarrass him. I want to prove a point, that we survived him, and that his methods don't work on people who refuse to break. That's dangerous. Everything we do is dangerous. At least this time we're choosing the battlefield. They sent the invitation a week later, a formal notice that Duke and Lady Ashford would be hosting a reception to celebrate the estate's financial restructuring. Everyone who mattered received one, including Lord Verne. The response was immediate. Acceptances flooded in, nobles who'd been watching their struggle with interest, merchants who saw an opportunity for new alliances, even some of Verne's own circle, drawn by curiosity or the promise of scandal. Verne's response arrived last. A single line, I look forward to the occasion. He's going to try something, Rowan predicted. Let him try. We'll be ready. The 2 weeks leading up to the reception were a blur of preparation. Mrs. Thorne transformed the manor into something that belonged in a painting, every surface polished, every room staged, the grounds manicured to impossible perfection. The kitchen staff worked miracles with a budget that was still tight but finally functional. Even the servants seemed energized, sensing that something significant was happening. Lydia spent her days coordinating details and her nights gathering documentation for the coalition. Every contract with Verne, every threatening letter, every piece of evidence that showed his pattern of manipulation. She copied everything, organized it meticulously, and stored the originals in the vault where Garrett's letters had once been hidden. The night before the reception, she couldn't sleep. She found Rowan on the terrace, staring out at the moonlit grounds. Nervous? She asked. Terrified. He didn't look at her. Tomorrow, we either prove we've won or demonstrate exactly how badly we've miscalculated. We haven't miscalculated. The numbers are solid, the loan is paid off, and we have allies now. Verne lost. Then why doesn't it feel like victory? Because you're still standing in the wreckage of what he tried to do to us. The humiliation, the threats, your brother... She stopped herself. Victory doesn't erase the cost. No, it doesn't. He finally looked at her. But at least we're still here. Both of us. Both of us, she agreed. They stood in comfortable silence, and Lydia realized something had shifted between them. Somewhere in the past 6 weeks, they'd stopped being reluctant allies forced together by circumstance. They'd become something else, partners who actually chose each other. Not because of love or obligation, but because they worked better together than apart. Thank you, Rowan said quietly. For what? For not leaving when you could have. For fighting when it would have been easier to surrender. For, he paused, searching for words. For being exactly who I needed, even when I didn't know I needed it. Lydia felt something warm unfurl in her chest. You're welcome. Though I mostly did it to spite Verne. He laughed. Even better reason. The reception began at 7. The manor was packed, at least 200 guests circulating through rooms that barely contained them all. Lydia greeted arrivals with Rowan at her side, playing the role of perfect duchess with an ease that surprised her. She'd spent so long feeling like an imposter that she'd forgotten how to simply be present, confident, real. Verne arrived fashionably late, flanked by Lords Cullen and Merivale. He looked exactly as he had at his own gathering, controlled, confident, radiating the certainty of someone who believed he'd already won. Your Grace, Lady Ashford, what a lovely event. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Though I admit I'm curious about the occasion, financial restructuring seems an odd thing to celebrate. Not when it represents freedom, Lydia said pleasantly. We're very pleased with the results. Are you? Verne's gaze sharpened. I wasn't aware you'd secured alternative financing. The loan I extended still has, 6 weeks until it's due? 5 weeks, actually, but we've decided to settle early. Rowan gestured toward the study. The payment is prepared whenever you're ready to receive it. For the first time since she'd met him, Lydia saw genuine surprise cross Verne's face. You're repaying the full amount? Nearly 90,000 crowns? In full. With interest calculated to today's date. Rowan's voice was steady. Unless you'd prefer we wait until the deadline? No, early payment is acceptable. Verne's composure was cracking at the edges. Might I ask where you acquired such capital? From investors who believe in the estate's future. The details are private. Lydia smiled. Shall we conclude the business? I'd hate to keep you from enjoying the reception. They moved to the study, and the crowd followed, sensing drama, hungry for whatever was about to unfold. The room filled until people were pressed shoulder to shoulder, all watching as Rowan opened a locked case and removed a certified bank draft. 92,400 crowns, he announced clearly. Full repayment of principal plus accrued interest as of today. Witnessed by, he gestured to the crowd. Well, everyone. He handed the draft to Verne, who took it mechanically, staring at the numbers like they might rearrange themselves into something less real. This is unusual, Verne said finally. Unusual but legal, Rowan replied. The loan contract had no early payment penalties. We're well within our rights. Of course, I simply didn't expect... Verne stopped himself, realizing that admitting he'd expected them to fail was tantamount to confessing his manipulation. Lydia stepped forward. We're grateful for your assistance when we needed it, Lord Verne, though I'm sure you understand why we prefer to stand on our own now. It was the gentlest possible way to tell him he'd lost his leverage, that they were free of his control, that every scheme he'd engineered had failed. Verne's expression went very still. Then he folded the draft carefully and tucked it into his coat. Congratulations on your resourcefulness, Lady Ashford. It seems I underestimated you. Most people do. I won't make that mistake again. He smiled, but there was nothing warm in it. Enjoy your evening. I suspect we'll be seeing more of each other soon. He left without another word, Cullen and Merivale trailing behind him like confused shadows. The crowd parted to let them pass, then immediately erupted into excited whispers. Lydia felt Rowan's hand touch her elbow gently. That was either brilliant or suicide. Possibly both. She watched Verne's carriage pull away through the window. But at least it's done. The reception continued for hours. People who'd avoided them before now sought them out, offering congratulations, asking questions about the estate's recovery, fishing for details about the mysterious investors. Lady Hartwick appeared at one point, gave Lydia a subtle nod of approval, and vanished back into the crowd. Around midnight, when most guests had departed and only close acquaintances remained, Countess Marlowe found Lydia on the terrace. Well played tonight. Thank you, though I suspect we've made an enemy for life. Verne was already your enemy, you just made him a weaker one. Marlowe handed her a sealed envelope. From the Coalition. Instructions for the next phase. Lydia opened it carefully. Inside were names, other families Verne had targeted, people who might be willing to testify about his methods. Contact information. Dates for discreet meetings. We're moving forward with the case, Marlowe explained. Your public repayment tonight was perfect. Shows he can be beaten. It'll encourage others to come forward. How long before we bring it to the Crown? 3 months, maybe 4. We need at least 2 more estates willing to go on record. Marlowe's expression turned serious. But Lady Ashford, Verne won't sit idle while we build this case. He'll retaliate, probably soon. We'll handle it? I hope so. Because if he breaks you before we're ready, he won't. Lydia folded the envelope. We've survived worse than Verne. We'll survive him too. Marlowe smiled. I believe you will, which is precisely why we chose you. The retaliation came 2 weeks later. Lydia was reviewing vendor contracts in the study when Mrs. Thorne burst in, face pale. Your Grace, there's been an incident at the stables. Lydia's stomach dropped. What kind of incident? Fire. Small one. We contained it quickly. But the investigators found accelerant. Someone set it deliberately. Lydia and Rowan reached the stables to find Thomas the groom coordinating cleanup efforts while smoke still curled from the damaged section. 3 stalls were destroyed, but miraculously, no horses injured. How bad? Rowan asked. Could have been worse. We caught it early. Thomas pointed to a broken lantern. This was placed in the hay storage. Meant to look like an accident, but the glass was shattered before the fire started. Someone smashed it, poured oil, and lit it. Any idea who? Stablehand saw a figure leaving around the time it started. Couldn't identify them. Too dark. But they were moving like they knew the layout. Lydia and Rowan exchanged glances. Verne. Had to be. Double the guards, Rowan ordered. No one enters the grounds without verification, and I want reports of anything unusual. Strangers, unexpected visitors, anything. Over the next month, more incidents occurred. Small acts of sabotage, contaminated grain shipments, damaged equipment. Rumors spread in the capital about the estate's finances being secretly unstable. Nothing catastrophic, but constant, designed to wear them down. He's trying to break our credibility before the coalition moves, Lydia said one evening, reviewing the latest damage report. Make us look incompetent so our testimony won't hold weight. It's working. 3 vendors have canceled contracts this week alone, citing concerns about reliability. Rowan rubbed his temples. If this continues, we'll actually become unstable. Then we accelerate the timeline. Talk to Hartwick. Tell her we need to move faster. The coalition isn't ready, neither were we when we faced the audit. But we did it anyway. Lydia stood. We can't keep playing defense. It's time to finish this. Lady Hartwick agreed to meet the next day, along with Marlowe and Kenrick. When Lydia explained the escalating sabotage, their expressions grew grim. He's more desperate than we thought, Kenrick said. Usually Verne prefers subtlety. This is aggressive, which means he's afraid, Hartwick countered. Afraid of what we're building. That's good. Fear makes people sloppy. It also makes them dangerous. Marlowe looked at Lydia. We've secured testimony from 2 more estates. That gives us 5 total. Enough to bring to the Crown if we move carefully. How carefully? We need a formal hearing. Present all evidence at once in an environment where Verne can't manipulate the outcome. Kenrick pulled out a calendar. The Provincial Council meets in 4 weeks. That's our window. 4 weeks? Lydia felt her pulse quicken. Can we survive 4 more weeks of sabotage? Can we afford not to try? Hartwick met her eyes. This is our shot, Lady Ashford. We present a united front, 5 estates, documented patterns, undeniable evidence. The council will have to act. And if they don't, then we've lost. And Verne will destroy every family involved to make an example. Marlowe's voice was flat. But if we win, we break his power permanently. No more predatory loans, no more using debt as a weapon, real reform. Lydia thought about the past 2 months. Everything they'd fought for, everything they'd risked. And she thought about the families who'd come after them, people who might face the same manipulation, the same impossible choices. All right, 4 weeks. We hold the line until then. The final month was brutal. Verne's attacks intensified. Not just sabotage now, but direct challenges. He filed complaints with the Crown about the estate's management, spread rumors that Lydia had married Rowan for money and was now bleeding the estate dry, even tried to poach key staff members with offers of higher pay elsewhere. But this time, they were ready. Every attack was documented, every rumor countered with facts, every staff member approached was warned and their testimony recorded. Lydia worked 18-hour days coordinating defense efforts while also gathering final evidence for the coalition. Mrs. Thorne became invaluable. Her network of household contacts across noble estates provided intelligence about Verne's movements. Thomas and the stable hands organized informal security patrols. Even the kitchen staff got involved, using their vendor relationships to verify which businesses Verne controlled. The estate became a fortress, not built on walls, but on people who decided they were worth defending. 3 days before the provincial council hearing, Verne made one final move. He showed up at the manor personally, without warning, demanding to speak with Rowan. They met in the drawing room, Rowan and Lydia on one side, Verne alone on the other. No witnesses this time, just 3 people who understood exactly what was at stake. "I'm here to offer terms," Verne said without preamble. "We're not interested," Rowan replied. "You should be. I know about the coalition. I know what you're planning for the council hearing." Verne leaned forward. "Drop the case. Publicly withdraw your testimony. In exchange, I'll cease all actions against your estate. And let you continue destroying other families? No. Then you're fools. Do you really think the council will rule against me? Half of them owe me favors. The other half are too afraid to cross me." His voice was cold. "You'll present your evidence, I'll present mine, and at the end, you'll have accomplished nothing except making yourselves targets." "Maybe," Lydia said quietly. "Or maybe you're here because you're actually scared. Because for the first time in years, someone's fighting back, and you don't know how to stop it." Verne's expression went dangerous. "You think you've won something, but all you've done is delay the inevitable. I will break you, Lady Ashford. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but eventually, you'll be the one who's broken." She stood, forcing him to look up at her. "Because we're not the only ones fighting you anymore. And sooner or later, the weight of all those families you've destroyed will come down on you like judgment. We're just the first ones to land a hit." Verne stood as well, and for a moment they were face to face, predator and prey, except neither was entirely sure who was which anymore. "We'll see," he said finally. Then he left, and Lydia realized her hands were shaking. Rowan touched her shoulder gently. "You all right?" "No, but I will be." She took a breath. 3 more days. The provincial council hearing took place in the capital's Grand Hall, a massive chamber designed to hold hundreds, currently packed with nobles, merchants, and anyone else who'd heard about the unprecedented case being brought against Lord Verne. Lydia sat with Rowan in the petitioners section, surrounded by representatives from the other 4 estates in the coalition. Lady Hartwick sat directly behind them, radiating quiet confidence. Across the aisle, Verne sat with his legal team, expression serene. The council consisted of 7 members, nobles appointed by the Crown to handle provincial disputes and policy matters. They filed in with ceremonial gravity and took their seats at the elevated bench. The head councillor, Lord Breslin, opened proceedings. "We're here to address accusations of predatory lending practices against Lord Edmund Verne. The petitioners will present their case first." Hartwick stood, addressing the council with the kind of practiced eloquence that came from years of political maneuvering. She outlined the pattern, how Verne targeted struggling estates, offered loans with impossible terms, then orchestrated circumstances to force default. She presented contracts from all 5 estates, showing identical clauses designed to trap borrowers. Then came the testimony. Each family representative spoke for 10 minutes, detailing their experiences. Lost estates, dissolved titles, financial ruin. The common thread was always Verne, offering help, then engineering destruction. When it was Lydia's turn, she approached the bench with the folder of evidence she'd compiled. Her heart was hammering, but her voice stayed steady. "My husband and I nearly lost everything because of Lord Verne's practices. He provided a loan we desperately needed, then systematically undermined our estate's operations to force default. He planted an embezzler in our staff. He threatened my father's creditors into demanding immediate repayment. He even..." She paused, choosing words carefully. "He even attempted to use my husband's personal family tragedies as leverage." She laid out the evidence. contracts, correspondence, documented sabotage, the Westbrook Foundation payments that had nearly bankrupted them. Every piece of the puzzle that showed Verne's methods weren't isolated incidents. They were deliberate strategy. We survived, she concluded, but only because we refused to break, and only because we found allies willing to stand with us. How many families didn't survive? How many more will fall if this council doesn't act? She returned to her seat, and Rowan squeezed her hand briefly. Then it was Verne's turn. He stood with casual grace, addressing the council like they were old friends having a philosophical discussion. These accusations are built on misunderstanding and emotion. Yes, I extended loans to struggling estates. That's what financiers do. And yes, some of those estates failed despite my assistance. But failure doesn't equal conspiracy. He smiled sadly. Lady Ashford claims I sabotaged her estate, but the evidence she presents shows only that she discovered mismanagement and corrected it, which is precisely what should happen. That her estate survived is proof the system works, not that it's broken. He produced his own documents, character witnesses, financial analyses showing his lending practices were within legal bounds, testimony from estates he'd helped successfully. It was polished, professional, and completely plausible if you didn't look too closely. The council deliberated for 2 hours while everyone waited in tense silence. When they returned, Lord Breslin's expression was unreadable. This council has reviewed all evidence and testimony. We find that while Lord Verne's lending practices are aggressive, they do not technically violate existing commercial law. A ripple of dismay went through the petitioners. However, Breslin's voice sharpened. The pattern of behavior documented here is concerning. 5 estates, all experiencing similar circumstances, all involving Lord Verne's financing. While each incident alone might be coincidental, the accumulation suggests systematic manipulation. Verne's confidence flickered. Therefore, this council rules as follows. Lord Verne is forbidden from extending new loans to provincial estates for a period of 5 years. His existing contracts will be reviewed by Crown auditors for compliance, and any future lending activities will be subject to enhanced oversight. Breslin looked directly at Verne. This is not a conviction, Lord Verne. Consider it a warning. The Crown is watching. The hall erupted, some people cheering, others protesting, everyone talking at once. Lydia sat frozen, trying to process what had just happened. They hadn't won completely. Verne wasn't being punished, wasn't losing his wealth or power, but he was being restricted, monitored. His ability to destroy families through debt had been curtailed. It was something, maybe even enough. We did it, Rowan said quietly beside her. Part of it, anyway. Part is better than nothing. Across the aisle, Verne was standing very still, staring at the council bench. Then his gaze shifted to Lydia, and she saw cold fury there. This wasn't over for him, not emotionally, not personally. He'd find other ways to hurt them, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid of that. Let him try. They'd beaten him once. They could do it again. The aftermath was complicated. Some nobles praised the council's decision as necessary reform. Others condemned it as overreach, worried about precedent. The coalition families were celebrated in some circles, vilified in others. Verne himself withdrew from public life for several weeks, and rumors swirled about his next moves. But for Lydia and Rowan, something quieter was happening. The estate stabilized. The loan from Hartwick's coalition was manageable. The operations were running efficiently, and for the first time since they'd married, they could actually plan for a future beyond next week's crisis. 6 weeks after the hearing, they hit the 6-month marriage mark. The trust fund from Rowan's mother became accessible, and with it, genuine financial security. They paid down debts, invested in long overdue improvements, and finally had room to breathe. One evening, Lydia found Rowan in the library staring at a letter. What's that? Formal divorce papers, from my attorney. He looked up at her. I commissioned them 6 months ago. Before the wedding, actually. Planned to file them the day after, like I promised. Lydia felt something twist in her chest. And now? Now I'm not sure what to do with them. He set the papers aside. We've fulfilled the trust fund requirement. Legally, there's no reason to stay married. You could leave, start over somewhere without all this, he gestured vaguely, mess. Is that what you want? No, he said it simply. But I'm not sure what I want matters. This was never supposed to be real. Lydia walked to the window, looking out at grounds she'd fought so hard to protect. You're right. This wasn't supposed to be real. It was supposed to be political theater followed by quiet annulment. I was supposed to be a solution to a problem, not a person. Lydia, but somewhere along the way it became something else. We became something else. She turned to face him. I'm not in love with you, Rowan. I don't know if I ever will be. But I respect you, trust you, and I like what we've built together. Not just the estate, but the partnership. So what are you saying? I'm saying the divorce papers are your choice. If you want to file them, I'll understand. If you want to keep this arrangement going, she paused. I'd be open to that too. Rowan stood, crossing to where she stood. You'd really stay? Even though you don't have to anymore? I'd stay because I want to. Not because I'm trapped, not because I need the money, but because I choose this. Choose us, whatever we are. He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he was seeing her for the first time. Then, very deliberately, he picked up the divorce papers and fed them into the fireplace. They caught quickly, curling into ash. Then we stay married, he said, not because of duty or obligation, but because we work better together than apart. That might be the least romantic proposal I've ever heard. Good thing I'm not proposing. We're already married. He smiled, genuine, warm, nothing like the cold duke who'd announced their divorce at the altar. I'm just choosing you, Lydia, same as you're choosing me. Then we're both idiots. Probably, but at least we're idiots together. She laughed, and the sound filled the library with something that felt dangerously close to happiness. 3 months later, Lydia stood in the same drawing room where Verne had made his final threat. But everything was different now. The estate was thriving, new investments had paid off, vendor relationships were strong, and the staff worked with efficiency born of mutual respect rather than fear. More importantly, other estates had started reaching out, families who'd heard about the council ruling and wanted advice on breaking free from Verne's contracts. Lydia had become something she never expected, a resource, someone other people turned to when they needed help navigating the same systems that had nearly destroyed her. Lady Hartwick visited regularly now, not as a creditor, but as something closer to a mentor. The coalition had grown to 8 estates, all working to reform lending practices across the provinces. It was slow work, fighting entrenched power, but it was happening. Verne himself had withdrawn from provincial finance, though rumors suggested he was moving his operations to the Southern Territories. Lydia suspected they'd cross paths again eventually, but next time, she wouldn't be the desperate bride with no options. She'd be someone who knew exactly how dangerous he was and how to fight back. Mrs. Thorne appeared in the doorway. Your Grace, the carriage is ready. Thank you. Lydia gathered her papers. Notes for a meeting with another struggling estate, recommendations for honest accountants, strategies for surviving hostile audits. Rowan met her in the entry hall, adjusting his coat. Ready? As I'll ever be. They stepped outside together into afternoon sunlight that made the Manor's gray stone look almost warm. The ground stretched out before them, not perfect, not without scars from recent battles, but theirs, hard-earned and worth defending. Do you ever think about that first day? Rowan asked as they climbed into the carriage. Standing at the altar while I announced the divorce? Sometimes. Usually when I want to remind myself how far we've come. Regret any of it? Lydia considered the question honestly. The fear, the exhaustion, the constant scrambling to survive, the victories that felt too small and defeats that felt crushing, marrying a stranger and building something real from wreckage. No, she said finally. I don't regret it. Even the terrible parts led us here. To riding in a carriage discussing estate management with people we've never met. To having choices, real ones, and making them together. The carriage rolled down the drive, past gardens they'd restored and stables they'd rebuilt. In the distance, workers were repairing the section of fence damaged in one of Verne's sabotage attempts. Everything was still a work in progress, the estate, their marriage, their lives. But it was their work, their progress, their choice to keep building. Rowan reached across the carriage and took her hand. Not dramatically, not romantically, just the simple gesture of someone who wanted connection. Lydia squeezed back and they rode toward the city in comfortable silence. 2 people who'd survived being pawns in someone else's game and decided to play their own instead. The road ahead was long. There would be more battles, more enemies, more moments where survival felt impossible, but they'd face them the same way they'd faced everything else. Together. Not because they had to, because they chose to. And that choice, that simple, hard-won decision to stand beside each other through chaos, turned out to be stronger than any contract, any obligation, any force that had tried to break them. They'd started as strangers forced into a marriage neither wanted. They'd become partners who wouldn't trade what they'd built for anything. And somewhere in that transformation, in the space between duty and choice, they'd found something neither expected but both recognized as worth keeping. Not love, necessarily. Not yet. But respect, trust, and the bone-deep certainty that whatever came next, they'd handle it. The way they handled everything, by refusing to break, by fighting smarter than their enemies expected, and by choosing each other every single day, even when, especially when, it would be easier not to. The carriage rounded the bend, and the capital came into view. Ahead, another family waited for advice on surviving the systems designed to crush them. Behind, the manor stood solid, proof that survival was possible. And between those 2 points, past and future, destruction and rebuilding, Lydia and Rowan rode together into whatever came next. Ready.